He looks at me like he has time, which should not be as disarming as it is. You changed, he says. You said wear something I don't care about ruining. I did say that. The corner of his mouth, the specific corner, left. How attached are you to the sneakers? Deeply. Good. Then you'll be careful. He opens the door before I can process the implication of that, and I slide in, and the leather smells like something old and real. And he gets in on the other side and doesn't explain anything. And I don't ask. This is new. This not asking. I have spent my entire adult life being the person who asks the clarifying question, who confirms the agenda, who sends the follow-up. 3 weeks in proximity to Ezra Calloway, and I am becoming someone who rides in unremarkable cars at midnight without asking where. I don't know how I feel about that. I know exactly how I feel about that. We go downtown, then further downtown, past the part of downtown I know, into the part I know only as a smear of color through a cab window. He parks on a street where the buildings are low, and the graffiti is old, and someone has put a string of yellow lights in a second-floor window that makes the whole block look like it's thinking warmly about something. Where are we? I ask. Somewhere I've been going since I was 22, he says. Somewhere nobody knows my name in the way I don't want them to. I turn that over in my mind, the specific way he said it, in the way I don't want them to. Because his name, I have come to understand, is a weight he carries differently depending on the room. In boardrooms, it is a weapon. In galleries, it is a credential. Here, apparently, it is something he gets to set down. I understand this more than I should. My own name has been a credential my whole life. My mother made sure of it. We walk half a block to a door with no sign. He knocks twice, actual knuckles on actual wood, and the door opens onto a stairwell that smells like brick and something floral, jasmine or something close to jasmine, and music I can feel before I can hear it. The basement is a jazz club in the way a river is water, technically accurate and entirely inadequate. The ceiling is low. The lights are amber, and they do things to the skin of everyone in the room, including his. The deep mahogany of his forearms against the white of his rolled sleeves. The planes of his face reconfigured by gold light into something almost architectural. I notice this the way I notice everything about him lately, with a precision that unnerves me. There is a woman singing. She is older. Her voice does not perform. It is low and direct and without apology, and I feel it in my sternum. Ezra says something to a man near the door, and the man leads us to a booth in the corner, curved, high-backed, intimate in the way that furniture can be intimate. A booth built for conversations that aren't meant to carry. We sit. We are close in the way that booths require. The candle between us is the squat, glass-enclosed kind. The kind from the bodega on my block. The kind my grandmother used to keep on her windowsill for reasons she never fully explained. I bought one last week, actually. It's sitting on my nightstand. I haven't lit it. I look at the candle and something moves in me. Not feeling exactly. More like recognition. The specific vertiginous sensation of a thing returning with its meaning rearranged. He orders for both of us without looking at the menu, which should irritate me, and doesn't. He orders bourbon, neat, and then looks at me across the candle flame. You hate that I ordered for you, he says. I was going to say the same thing. Were you? I was going to order bourbon. I know. The specific confidence of that. I know. Not I thought so, or interesting, or good. I know. As if in the weeks of noticing that I've been doing, he has also been noticing, and arrived at fluency before I did, and is not performing modesty about it. I should find this insufferable. I'm going to need a minute. The bourbon arrives. It is good bourbon. It burns the way good things burn, deliberate, measured with a finish that lingers on purpose. The singer starts something slow. The bass player drops into it like he's been waiting all night, and I feel the room exhale. Ezra is watching her, not me, and this is the first time tonight I've had the chance to watch him unobserved, and I use it. The way his hand rests on the table, relaxed but deliberate, a man who knows where his hands are. The slight movement in his jaw when the music hits something particular, involuntary, honest. A small gold ring on his right index finger that I have never noticed before, and the ring is not new, and I do not know how I missed it. And suddenly I want to know everything about it in a way that is wildly disproportionate to its significance. This is what proximity to him has done. He has made the small things feel consequential, and I have not yet figured out if that is his intention or simply the gravitational effect of him. He turns his head and catches me looking. I do not look away. I don't know where that comes from. I have been careful, measured in exactly the way I've been trained to be, professional managed. But something about this room, this specific amber dark, this woman's voice that doesn't perform, something about it unlocks a version of me that doesn't calibrate. "What are you thinking?" he asks, low, even, genuinely curious. "I'm thinking," I say, and I lean forward slightly, just enough to make the candle relevant between us. "That you brought me here because you wanted to be known by someone, in a room where nobody knows you." His expression does not change. Something behind it does. "And?" he says. "And I think that's the most honest thing you've offered me." Silence. The music fills it, not awkwardly, but the way silence is supposed to be filled, generously, without erasing anything. He picks up his glass, drinks, sets it down with a care that is almost ceremonial. "You're going to be a problem," he says, and his voice has a quality I haven't heard before. Not warning, not invitation. Something more dangerous than either. Something that sounds like relief. "I've been told," I say. And then I don't decide this. It simply happens the way the truest things tend to. I reach across the table and touch the ring on his right hand. Just my index finger, just the gold, just 1 second of contact. Not asking anything. Claiming something. The information that I can touch what I want to know, and the world will not end. His breath catches. Specific. Unmistakable. I pull my hand back. I look at the singer. She is finishing something beautiful. Ezra Calloway says nothing for 45 seconds, which I count without meaning to. And when he finally speaks, his voice is different. Stripped of the layer it usually wears, the one that manages things. "That ring was my father's," he says. "He gave it to me the last night I saw him." The music swells and then drops, and then the room applauds. And underneath the applause I hold perfectly still, because I understand suddenly and completely that whatever this is between us, whatever unnamed frequency has been vibrating in the base of my spine for weeks, it is no longer only about wanting him. It is about knowing him. And that is so much more terrifying that my hands are steady only because I've decided they will be. The singer leans into the microphone and starts something new, darker, slower, a song that sounds like a decision being made. And Ezra turns to look at me with that expression I don't have a name for yet, the one that is question and answer at the same time. "Stay for the second set," he says. It is not a question. And I realize, with a clarity that hits like cold water, that staying for the second set is the last completely safe thing I will do tonight. Chapter 15. Masking Identities. There is a photograph my mother keeps on her vanity. One of those images that shouldn't exist, taken at an angle no one intended, catching something the photographer didn't know they were catching. My mother, 26 years old, standing at the edge of a ballroom floor in a gown the color of burnt amber, her back slightly turned from whoever she was talking to, her attention caught by something just outside the frame. Her face is not performing joy. It is not performing anything. It is simply open, raw and receptive and quietly stunned, the way a face looks in the moment before it understands what it's feeling. I used to study that photograph like it was a map to somewhere I'd never been. I understand it now. The mask is ivory and gold, and it covers everything from my forehead to just below my cheekbones, curving over the bridge of my nose in a sweep of hand-painted magnolias, cream petals edged in 24-karat detail, done by an artisan in the 7th Ward whose waiting list is 3 months long. My sister handled that. My sister handles everything with the kind of cheerful ruthlessness I have spent 31 years aspiring to. "You look terrifying," she told me when she slid it over my face and tied the silk ribbon at the back of my braids. In the best way, like something with teeth. I thought she was flattering me. I don't think that anymore. The Beaumont Arsenault Masquerade happens every year on the last Saturday of October in a renovated sugar refinery on the edge of the Garden District. 3 stories of raw brick and vaulted iron, draped tonight in black velvet and candlelight that has no business being this intimate in a room holding 400 people. The air carries champagne and something underneath it, something older. Beeswax, amber resin, the particular sweetness of cut flowers left just slightly too long in warm water. Beautiful and just barely over the edge. The kind of smell that makes you think about time. I have been here 11 minutes. I know this because I checked my watch in the car, because I have always been the kind of woman who checks her watch, who accounts for time, who manages it, who portions it out responsibly, and returns home with some to spare. This is who I am. Imara Ose-Mensah, Senior Structural Consultant, daughter of Kofi and Adeze. Woman who brings her own pen to every signing because hotel pens are unreliable. The watch is in my clutch now. I don't know when I took it off. I'm standing near the bar on the 2nd floor mezzanine, one hand wrapped around a champagne flute I haven't actually sipped from, looking down at the ballroom floor below where couples are moving through something that isn't quite a waltz, something more improvised and more dangerous, the music doing things that make the motion of bodies look like a question being asked and answered and asked again. My mask is heavy in a way I didn't expect, not uncomfortable, present, like it has mass and intention, like wearing it rearranges something in the chest, loosens a latch I didn't know I'd been keeping locked. I notice him before I have a single thought about noticing him. That's the only honest way to describe it. It isn't a decision. It is prior to decision. He is on the floor below me, near the far wall where the candlelight is thinnest, and the shadows collect like something that belongs there. And I register him the way you register a change in atmospheric pressure, not with your eyes first, but with some older, less educated part of you. The back of the neck, the space between the shoulder blades. His mask is all black, clean lines. It covers less of his face than mine does, just the eyes and the upper portion of the cheeks, a minimalist severity that makes the lower half of his face more present by contrast. The specific angle of his jaw, the stillness of his mouth. He is not performing stillness the way some men do, making a show of being unmoved. He is simply still, the way deep water is still, the kind of still that has a pull to it. He is looking at something to his left. He has not looked up. I look away. I take my first sip of champagne. My thumb finds the rim of the flute and presses there, just the lightest pressure, feeling the glass. The thing I have no framework for is this. I am aware of him the same way you are aware of a sound you can't quite identify, not with your full attention, never directly, but in the peripheral register of your nervous system, constant and low and impossible to turn off. I move through the first hour of the evening doing what I came to do. I find my colleague Renata and her husband near the string quartet. I admire the architecture with genuine feeling because old iron and brick renovation is not merely beautiful to me, but a kind of moral act. I accept a second champagne from a passing server, and this time I drink it with purpose. But I always know where he is. Not consciously. That's what I mean. I don't track him. I just know. The same way you know where a door is in a dark room. Something in the architecture of my attention has reorganized itself around a fixed point, and I have not given it permission to do this, and it does not appear to require permission. He crosses the room at 9:47. He passes within 12 feet of me. He doesn't look at me. The back of my knees goes warm. I stand there for 3 full seconds after he's passed, completely still, trying to identify what just happened in my body. and I cannot. I have words for hunger, for fear, for grief, for fatigue, for the particular satisfaction of a calculation that comes out clean. But I do not have words for this specific register of warmth in the backs of my knees and what it is connected to. And the not having words for it is somehow more alarming than the thing itself. I excuse myself from the conversation I'm in. I get another champagne. I move to the far edge of the mezzanine where the iron railing meets the brick wall, and I lean there, looking out, and I tell myself I am appreciating the architecture. That's load-bearing. The voice comes from my left, close enough that I feel rather than hear the low register of it, a frequency that travels through material rather than air. I turn. He's there, black mask, the still mouth, taller than he looked from above, which is not a thing I was supposed to notice, but apparently my body keeps its own notes. I follow his gaze to where it's aimed, a repaired seam in the original brick archway above the entrance below us. The rehabilitation work done carefully, done honestly. The new material not pretending to be old. I know, I say. They preserved the original corbelling. You can see where the newer brick starts. The color differential is about 4 shades. A beat. You know masonry, he says. I know structures. I turn back to face forward, which means I am no longer looking at him. This is a deliberate choice. What gave you the idea I didn't? Silence. Then the dress. I look down at myself. The gown my sister chose, draped silk in a shade somewhere between midnight blue and the kind of black that still holds color when the light finds it right. Cut to sit at the edge of occasion and suggestion simultaneously. My braids are pinned up and my collarbones are out, and I look exactly like someone who does not spend her Tuesdays calculating live load versus dead load on reinforced concrete frames. That's very careless of you, I say. Yes, he says simply, and there is something in the way he says it that doesn't sound like an apology. It sounds like an acknowledgement, like he's filed the error and has no intention of making it again. I turn to look at him then. His eyes behind the mask are very dark and very direct, and they are looking at me with the same quality of attention I noticed from across the room, the weight of it. I have been looked at before. Men have looked at me. This is different in a way I refuse to analyze, standing 12 inches from a stranger at a party. Imara, I say, not my last name, first name only, the masquerade convention. Solomon, he says. We do not dance. This is important. There is a moment, early, while the string quartet is transitioning between pieces and the floor briefly clears, where it would have been natural to move toward the dancing, and we both don't, and neither of us acknowledges that we both don't, and the not acknowledging it charges the air between us with something specific and deliberate. We talk about the building. He knows more than someone should, and I say this to him. You know more than someone should, and he says, I know exactly as much as I should. The distinction hangs there. We talk about New Orleans the way people talk about a person they are complicated about. Specific stories, specific textures, the food, the music, the weight of what this city holds, and what it costs to love it. He says something about Treme, and I say something back, and then we are not talking about the city anymore. We are talking about inheritance, what you keep, what keeps you, what you carry forward into lives that look nothing like where you came from. His voice does not do what I expect voices to do when the subject turns to wait. It gets quieter, more precise. I am leaning against the iron railing with both forearms resting on it now, my champagne forgotten on the ledge beside me, and I realize I have migrated 6 inches closer to him over the course of the conversation, without tracking the migration, and this fact arrives in my consciousness like a small, bright alarm. I straighten. I turn to face him fully, which means I am closer than I realized, and his mask is there. And beneath the mask, the lower half of his face, and I can see that the still mouth is not entirely still now. Something in me makes a decision before I am aware of making it. I reach up. My fingers find the edge of his mask at the temple. Just the edge, just the lightest contact with the gold-tipped edge of the design. And I don't lift it. I don't push it. I simply hold it there. His breath catches. I feel that catch like it happened inside my own chest. I want to see your face, I say, and the saying of it, the directness of it, unprompted, unprecedented in my own history of never saying the direct thing, lands somewhere in the space between my ribs and does something structural there. He does not move. He is very still. Not yet, he says. His hand comes up and covers mine, the hand that is touching his mask, and does not remove it, just covers it, holds it there against the edge of his mask, my fingers held inside the warmth of his palm. The string quartet begins again below us. 400 people in silk and velvet and gorgeous, elaborate lies about who they are, and I am standing with my hand pressed to the face of a man I have known for 40 minutes, and the backs of my knees are burning, and my mother's photograph blooms open in the back of my mind. Her face at the edge of a ballroom, open and stunned, looking at something just outside the frame. And for the first time in 31 years, I know what she was looking at. He leans forward, just slightly, a degree, maybe two, and his mouth is near my ear when he says, very quietly, with the particular precision of a man who chooses every word, the way you choose a load-bearing element. I need you to know something, Imara, before this goes any further, before you decide. His thumb moves, once, slowly, across the back of my hand. I don't play at any of this. The music swells. Somewhere below us, a woman laughs, bright and unguarded, cutting through the velvet weight of the room. I do not pull my hand back. Chapter 16. First taste of submission. The argument started over a glove. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. An actual glove, ivory silk, 3 buttons at the wrist, the left one, which I had dropped somewhere between the receiving line and the east corridor, and which Marcus Devereaux had retrieved, and was now holding between 2 fingers like evidence at a trial. You dropped this, he said. I'm aware, I said. You can give it back. I could. The Whitmore ballroom was a full roar behind us. 100 conversations, the string quartet working through something that felt too cheerful for the temperature between us. The clink of crystal against crystal, all of it pressing at my back like a hand. We had stepped into the corridor because I had needed air, which was a lie, I told myself. What I had needed was to stop watching him from across the room and feeling the watching as a physical thing, like pressure behind my sternum, like the way the air changes before a storm when you can feel it in your back teeth. He was still holding my glove. Marcus. His name in my mouth felt like biting down on something I hadn't been offered. Give it back. Say please. The nerve of it. The absolute breathtaking nerve, spoken in that voice that never quite landed where you expected it to, low and unhurried, the way a man speaks when he has decided that time belongs to him. I had known Marcus Devereaux for 4 months and 16 days, which I knew because I had stopped counting at 4 months and had then, without meaning to, started again. I had catalogued his contradictions the way other women catalog shoes, the ruthlessness with which he ran Devereaux Capital, the way he remembered that I took my coffee with exactly 1 sugar and a half, not a full half, the way he could dismantle a room with a single sentence and then turn around and say something so specific, so quietly observant, that it felt like being seen through glass you didn't know was transparent. I hated that I had catalogued him. I hated it the way you hate a habit that has already won. This isn't a game, I told him. No, he agreed, and the agreement was somehow worse than the argument. It isn't. The corridor was lit by sconces, warm amber light that turned his dark brown skin into something that belonged in a painting. The planes of his face, the strong column of his throat above his white tie, the way he held himself with that particular stillness that I had come to understand was not calm. It was control. There was a difference, and I knew the difference now, in the way you know a word differently after you've looked up its etymology. Control requires effort. Calm requires nothing at all. He was working at something. I was the thing he was working at. Josephine. My full name, 3 syllables, and he put a weight on the first one that he had no right to. No one called me Josephine. I was Joe to everyone who knew me. Joe to my mother, Joe on the byline of every article I'd published for 6 years. But he had decided somewhere in our first week of collision that Josephine was what I was, and he had been making that argument with nothing but pronunciation ever since, and I had been losing it in increments small enough to pretend they weren't losses. "What?" I said, flat. "You've been watching me all evening." The accuracy of this was so complete that my response came out wrong. Too fast, too clean. "I've been watching The Room." "The Room," he said, "doesn't make you tuck your chin down when it looks back." I tucked my chin down. He saw it happen. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, more like the beginning of a decision. "This is the part where I should tell you I held my ground. I would like to tell you that. I am a woman with a graduate degree, 2 published books, and a spine that has held through things considerably more serious than one man in one corridor. I have faced down board members and editors and my own mother's silence, which is the most devastating weapon in her particular arsenal. I was not a woman who tucked her chin for anyone. And yet, he took one step toward me, unhurried like a man who already knew where he was going to end up, and the sconce light moved across him, and I became aware of something I had no name for, a kind of reorganization happening inside my chest. The way a room sounds different when all the furniture has been moved 2 inches to the left. Nothing removed, everything displaced. "I make you nervous," he said. "You make me annoyed." Those aren't mutually exclusive. He was close enough now that I could smell him. Cedar, and something warmer underneath it. Something that lived in the fabric of his jacket, and I recognized with a clarity that felt almost clinical that my body was doing something my mind had not authorized. The specific warmth of it started at the backs of my knees, of all places, the back of my knees, and moved upward with the patience of something that was not in a hurry because it had already decided. I had never been a woman who described herself as wanting things. I had been a woman who had goals, preferences, positions. I had wanted my career. I had wanted my apartment. I had wanted specific outcomes. But this was not that vocabulary. This was a different language entirely, one I had apparently been learning without attending the classes. And the sudden fluency of it was terrifying in the way that only true things are terrifying. He held the glove out, not to give it back. He held it by the wrist edge, open, waiting, and looked at me with those dark eyes that I had spent 4 months cataloging and still could not predict, and said, quietly, with all the weight of someone making a very specific offer, "Put it on." "You're not serious." "I'm always serious," he said. "You know that about me." I did know that about him. That was the problem with knowing things about Marcus Devereaux. The knowledge never simplified anything. Every fact about him opened into something more complex, the way every door in his presence seemed to lead to another corridor rather than a room. I could have taken the glove from his hand. I could have done it in one motion and walked back into the ballroom and resumed my conversation with Elaine Hargrove about the arts endowment, and never mentioned this corridor to anyone. That was the available exit. It was clearly marked. My competent, independent, fully assembled self was standing right beside it, with her hand on the knob. I lifted my arm. He slid the glove over my fingers with the kind of focus that made something inside me go very quiet and very loud at the same time. His thumbs smoothing the silk over my knuckles, adjusting the fit at my palm. And his attention on the task was not servile. It was not deferential. It was the attention of a man who touches things only when he intends to, and intends to thoroughly. He worked each button at the wrist, first, second, third, and I was not breathing in any meaningful way. "There," he said, and released my hand. I waited for the triumph in his voice, for the smirk, the claim, some evidence that he understood what had just happened as a victory. Men who operate the way Marcus operates, men who see the exit and close it with perfect timing, they usually want you to see them winning. He just looked at me. Something in his expression that I couldn't name, something that was not triumph, that was closer to recognition, as though he had just confirmed something he had suspected about himself as much as about me, as though whatever had happened in this corridor had cost him something too. "You should go back in," he said. "Lady Whitmore is about to make the announcement about the Caldwell estate, and you'll want to be positioned near the Hargrove party when she does." He knew my professional moves. He tracked them. He knew why I was at this ball, and it wasn't for the champagne. "How do you know about the Caldwell announcement?" I asked, because my brain, bless it, had decided to reassert relevance. "Because I'm the reason there's an announcement to make," he said, simply, and straightened his lapel and looked at me one more time with that expression I couldn't catalog, the one that didn't fit any of the files I had built for him, and said, "Go write your story, Josephine." I walked back into the ballroom with both gloves on and my spine fully operational and my face arranged into the expression I had practiced in mirrors for 6 years, present, poised, professionally interested. The string quartet had moved on to something in a minor key, something with friction in it. Elaine Hargrove waved me over. Lady Whitmore was ascending the small dais at the far end of the room, with the measured gait of a woman about to say something that will change the shape of the evening. I took out my phone to make notes. Journalist, professional, here for the story. Except my gloved hands were still warm. The backs of my knees had not received the message that the moment was over. And something I had been carrying for 4 months, something I had labeled as annoyance, as professional complication, as the reasonable friction of two ambitious people in frequent proximity, had just quietly, without asking my permission, changed its name. I did not yet know what to call it. I only knew that the corridor had done something to the architecture of the room, that the ballroom, full and brilliant and buzzing with consequence, felt like a place I was visiting now, while the corridor was where I had actually been. Lady Whitmore began to speak. I transcribed. My phone screen glowed. My notes were good, clean, usable. And behind me, somewhere in the press of the crowd, I felt the exact moment Marcus Devereaux re-entered the room. Not because I heard him, not because anyone announced him, but because the air pressure changed in some specific and unscientific way, and my spine knew it before my brain did. I did not turn around, but my gloved hand went still above my phone screen, and I understood, with the kind of clarity that arrives too late to be useful as a warning, that the thing I had been refusing to name had just looked me directly in the eye, and I had looked back. Whatever came next was no longer something that was happening to me. Chapter 17. Dare to desire more. There is something deeply inconvenient about wanting a thing you don't have a word for yet. I've been sitting with that inconvenience for 11 days. 11 days since the Meridian dinner, since he looked at me across a table crowded with crystal and candlelight and the soft, self-congratulatory murmur of people who believe their money makes them interesting, and said absolutely nothing, just looked. The way a mathematician looks at an equation he already knows the answer to. Patient and certain and faintly amused by the time the problem is taking. I didn't know what to do with being looked at like that. I still don't. What I know is this. I have rearranged my apartment twice, finished one legal brief, and started another I didn't need to start, downloaded 3 meditation apps and deleted 2, made jerk chicken from scratch at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night, the Scotch bonnet fumes stinging my eyes until they watered, and stood over the stove telling myself that was why I was crying. My grandmother's recipe, my mother's skillet, the smell so specific and memory-dense that for a moment I was 12 years old in a Crown Heights kitchen, safe in a world I understood completely. I am not 12. I am not safe. And I understand almost nothing about what is happening to me. His name is Marcus Adeyemi. He is the Chief Acquisitions Officer at Vantage Capital, which means he makes decisions that move money the way weather moves. Vast, impersonal, reshaping everything in its path. He is 41 years old, 6 feet and 2 inches of a man who was clearly assembled by someone with strong opinions about architecture. His skin is deep brown, the shade of aged mahogany in afternoon light. And when he enters a room, I have now witnessed this 4 times, the room adjusts. Not metaphorically. I mean the actual physics of the space reorganize around where he decides to stand. Conversations shorten. Posture straightens. People become more careful versions of themselves. I told my colleague Priya about this phenomenon. She nodded like I had described rain. That's just money, she said. Power does that. But I've been in rooms with powerful men before. Partners at the firm, a federal judge who once made opposing counsel weep. My father who could silence a dinner table with the specific quality of his silence. I know what power looks like when it fills a room. This is something different. This feels like standing at the edge of something with no railing. He is my client. There it is. The fact I keep placing in front of myself like a traffic cone, and keep walking around anyway. The Vantage Capital restructuring is the largest matter my firm has handled in 6 years, and I am the associate the partners trust most with the complexity of it, which is either a compliment or a punishment depending on the day. Marcus Adeyemi is my primary point of contact. We have now had 4 formal meetings, 11 email exchanges, and 2 phone calls that lasted longer than they needed to. The coffee carts sending up thin columns of steam, and having the following internal conversation with myself. You are a 32-year-old attorney with a Columbia Law degree, a condo you own outright, and a reputation for being the least flustered person in any given room. I already am. I am simply committing to managing the visibility of it, which is the closest thing I have to a strategy right now. He arrives 7 minutes early. I know because I hear him before I see him, not his voice, but the change in the ambient sound of the hallway outside my office. The way the receptionist's normally flat professional greeting takes on a half note of additional warmth. Then the knock on my open door, 2 knuckles, unhurried, which is somehow more commanding than if he had walked straight in. Counselor. I turn from the window. He is wearing charcoal gray today. A suit that was clearly built specifically for his shoulders, which are the kind of broad that looks effortless rather than constructed. His tie is a deep burgundy, not a color men wear without intention. And his locks are pulled back, bound low at the nape of his neck, and I notice for the first time a few threads of silver at his temples that were not in his official Vantage Capital headshot. And something in my chest does a thing I choose not to analyze. Mr. Adeyemi. I gesture to the chair across my desk. You're early. I'm always early. He doesn't move toward the chair. He moves toward the window instead, standing beside me rather than across from me, which is not where clients stand. And he looks down at the street with what appears to be genuine interest. You have a view of the whole thing from here. It's part of the compensation package. Is it worth it? The question is light. There is nothing overt in it. But something in the angle of it, the fact that he's not looking at me when he asks, makes it feel like he's asking about more than the view. And I am acutely aware that I do not have an answer I trust myself to give him. On good days, I say. He turns then, and looks at me in that way, that patient, certain, faintly amused way, and says nothing for 3 full seconds, which is a very long time when someone is standing 12 inches away from you, and you can smell cedarwood and something darker beneath it, something that doesn't have a retail name. I brought the amended partnership disclosures, he says. Dark humor rising in me like a survival instinct. Then by all means let's talk about something that won't get either of us in trouble. He laughs. It's short, low, and real. And it is the most dangerous thing that has happened in this office all year, because it changes the geometry of him entirely. The commanding architecture loosens. And for just a moment he is simply a man who finds something funny. And I like him so suddenly and so completely that I have to look back at the straight. We work for 90 minutes. This is the thing I need to be clear about. We actually work. I am good at my job, and so is he. And the Vantage restructuring has 3 legitimately thorny legal complications. that require both of us to think hard, and we do. He asks sharp questions. He catches an implication in the disclosure language on page 47 that two senior partners missed. When I tell him this, he raises an eyebrow exactly 2 millimeters and says, "I'm not paying your firm to miss things on page 47. Fair point. Adjust the language? Already on it. He nods once, and I feel that nod in a place that has nothing to do with contract law. This is the problem. This is the specific, maddening, completely unprecedented problem. Everything he does reads double. Not because he is manipulative. I've dealt with manipulative men. I know that particular frequency of wrongness. But because he is paying complete attention. The way he listens when I speak has a quality of stillness that I am not accustomed to. Like he is actually hearing the things under the things I'm saying. Men don't usually do that. Or maybe they do, and I've spent the last decade building rooms inside myself with walls too thick to notice. At 11:47, we are finished with the disclosures. He doesn't immediately move to gather his things. He leans back in the chair across from me. He finally sat down, 20 minutes into the meeting, when I pointed at the chair with the pen in my hand and said please in a tone that I realize now was less a request than a small, controlled assertion of authority in my own space. And he looks at the legal pad in front of him, where his notes are written in a handwriting that is small and precise and nothing like what I expected. "You went to Spelman," he says. I go still. "That's on my bio." "Your grandmother went to Spelman, and her mother before her. Now I am still in a different way." "That is not on my bio." "No," he looks up. "You mentioned it during the Meridian dinner, in passing, to the woman from the museum board." He pauses. "You didn't think I was listening. I thought you were talking to the managing director." "I was. I was also listening to you." The room is doing that thing again. That reorganizing thing. The afternoon light coming through the window has shifted while we were working. And it's falling across half his face now, illuminating the straight line of his nose and the cut of his cheekbone, and the very deliberate way he is holding my gaze. And I become aware of several things simultaneously. My hands are still on the desk. I have not moved in 30 seconds. He is not going to be the one to look away first. He never is. "Why are you telling me that?" My voice comes out even. I am proud of my voice. "Because you looked across the room at that point in the conversation," he says. "The way a person looks when they're saying something that matters to them, and they don't expect anyone to catch it, and someone should have caught it." The silence that follows this is so precisely unbearable that I say the first thing that comes to me, which is, "I have a 2 o'clock. His mouth does something that is technically a smile, but contains multitudes. "I have a lunch." Neither of us moves. "Simone." He says my name the way he said it on Tuesday, with that quality of having considered it first, and I feel the specific weight of it land at the base of my sternum and spread outward, slow and warm and terrifyingly unfamiliar. What happens when you stop being careful? I open my mouth. I close it. He stands unhurried, gathering his folio with the methodical ease of a man who has never once rushed toward anything, because he has never needed to. He buttons his jacket. He looks at me one more time with that patient, knowing, infuriating certainty. "I'll see you Thursday," he says, "for the restructuring call." "Thursday," I confirm. He walks to the door, stops, doesn't turn around. "Wear the green next time." And then he is gone, and I am standing in my own office in a charcoal pencil skirt he has never seen, and my hands are shaking in a way that has nothing to do with fear. And the worst part, the part I will think about until Thursday, and probably long after, is that I don't own anything green. Which means he already knows what I'm going to go looking for. Chapter 18. Confessions in the Dark. The crystal hits the floor before I realize I've knocked it off the shelf. It doesn't shatter, just rolls in a long, wobbly arc across the hardwood, catching the low lamplight until his foot stops it. He doesn't look down. He's looking at me. He's been looking at me for the last 4 minutes like I am a problem he has already solved and is now simply waiting for me to catch up. You were saying, he says. I was saying. I was in the middle of telling him something that felt important 20 minutes ago, before the room went dark outside the single lamp on his desk, before the city below the floor-to-ceiling windows decided to go quiet in that particular way that New York goes quiet after midnight. Not silent, never silent, but low, like the whole island has agreed to lower its voice. Before I noticed the way the light was hitting the left side of his face and doing something I don't have words for. I was saying you had no right to do that without asking me first. You're correct. That stops me. I'd prepared a whole architecture of argument, and he's just agreed. Casually. The way you agree that it might rain tomorrow. I stand there in the middle of his study, bare feet on cold floor, hair loose because it was supposed to be a brief conversation, and has now become something else entirely. And I have absolutely nothing. You're doing that thing, I tell him. What thing? Where you agree with me so I can't fight you. The corner of his mouth moves. Not a smile. Not quite. Something more private than that. Imara. My name in his mouth is a specific event. The way he says it. Not Imara, the way most people collapse it, but full, unhurried, the second syllable landing like he owns it, does something to the back of my knees that I have no framework for. Not warmth, not weakness, something closer to the feeling of stepping off a curb you didn't see, that sudden recalibration of the body when the ground isn't where you expected it. Don't say my name like that. Like what? Like you're deciding something. He picks up the crystal from the floor, turns it once in his hand. It's a paperweight, a sphere of dark green glass that looks almost black in this light, and sets it back on the shelf with a deliberateness that feels like a complete sentence. Then he straightens to his full height, and I am reminded again, stupidly, as if I keep forgetting and needing to learn it over, that Dorian Ashford takes up space the way weather does. Not aggressively, just atmospherically. The room pressure changes when he moves. Sit down, he says, then quieter. Please. The please is unexpected. It lands differently than any command would. I sit on the edge of the leather chair across from his desk, because my legs have apparently decided to cooperate with him, even when my mouth won't. He doesn't sit. He moves to the window, his back to me, hands loose at his sides, looking out at the city. He's still in the dress shirt from dinner, sleeves rolled to the forearm, no jacket, and in the dark of the window glass, I can see the faint reflection of his face. He's not looking at the city. He's watching me in the glass. I keep my eyes on the back of his head. There's something I haven't told you, he says. The room does something. The air quality shifts. I can smell cedar and something underneath it, warmer. The specific heat of a person who has been sitting in the same space for hours. The way a room retains a body. I am aware of my own breathing in a way I am not usually aware of my breathing. Is it worse than what you already told me on Tuesday? He turns from the window. That depends on whether you're afraid of heights or depths. I've never understood that question. Every fall is both. Something moves across his face. Surprise, I think, though Dorian Ashford does not look like a man who surprises easily. He crosses the room slowly and sits in the chair beside mine, not across from me at the desk, beside me, close enough that I can see the small scar at his temple that I once asked about, and he deflected so smoothly, I only realized the deflection 40 minutes later. I was engaged, he says. 3 years ago. It doesn't matter who she was. What matters is that I told her the truth about who I am, what I need, what a life with me would require. The real version, not the version I show at dinners and in boardrooms. I wait. She used it, he says, specifically and surgically, at a moment designed to cause maximum damage. He pauses. I underestimated her. That was my failure, not hers. The equanimity in his voice is not the equanimity of a man who is healed. It's the equanimity of a man who has built very precise walls and furnished them very nicely and called it peace. What did she do? He looks at me for a long time before he answers. In the lamplight, his skin is deep brown, the particular warmth of polished walnut, and there are shadows under his eyes tonight that weren't there at dinner. And I find myself wanting to press my thumb to each one, which is an insane thing to want, so I don't. She called my mother, he says. The laugh comes before I can stop it. It bursts out of me. Loud, inappropriate, completely wrong for the gravity of the moment. And I clap my hand over my mouth and his expression cracks. And then we are both laughing in his dark study at midnight. And it's the most honest thing that has happened between us in 18 days. Your mother, I manage. My mother, he confirms. And the remnant of the laugh on his face makes him look younger and more dangerous at the same time. Who had opinions, extensive, phone call lasting, family dinner surviving opinions. God, I press my hand to my sternum. I'm sorry. That's awful. I shouldn't be laughing. You absolutely should be. It's the only reasonable response. And then something shifts. The laughter feigns the way laughter does when it has done its work. And we are left in what it cleared. All the air it moved aside coming back in warm and close. And the space between our chairs is not very much space, and he has not moved, and neither have I, and the quality of his attention is different now. He is looking at me the way he looked at me in the window glass, like he's watching something happen in real time and has decided to let it. Why are you telling me this? I ask. My voice is steady. I am proud of my voice. Because you told me about your sister on the drive back from Connecticut, and I didn't give you anything in return, and you noticed, and you didn't call me on it, and I've been thinking about that for 6 days. I did notice, and I didn't call him on it because I hadn't yet figured out why it bothered me, which meant I hadn't finished deciding whether to let it bother me, and by the time I had finished deciding, it was 3 a.m, and the moment had passed. That he tracked it, that he held it and came back to it and is returning it to me now, does something to the inside of my chest that I need a minute with. Okay, I say, we're confessing things. If you want. I don't know if I want. Pause. That's the confession. I have spent the last 3 weeks not knowing what I want. I have a very sophisticated vocabulary for what I think, what I observe, what I recommend to other people. I can tell you what 47 other people in my life need and want and would benefit from. When it comes to my own, I have this. I gesture at the space between us, which is a strange thing to gesture at, but he understands. I can tell by the way his chin tilts a fraction. And I don't have a word for it. You don't need a word for it. I need something. I'm a person who needs coordinates. He leans forward then, elbows on knees, closing the distance by degrees so gradual that I only register how much closer he is when I realize I can see the individual links of his watch in the low light. His hands are loose between his knees. Large hands, careful hands, hands that I have watched do a dozen ordinary things. Sign documents, pass glasses, adjust a cufflink. And every time, involuntarily, I track them with my peripheral vision, like my body has developed its own agenda, independent of my brain's full awareness. Imara. There it is again. That decision in my name. If you're about to say something that changes things, I say, I need you to know I'm not ready. I know. Then why are you looking at me like that? Because, he says, you are sitting in my chair, in my study, in the dark, telling me you have no words for what you're feeling. And I think you do have words. I think you've had them for days. I think you came in here tonight not because of what I did without asking, but because you needed a reason to be in this room after midnight. The accuracy of that is, it's almost violent. The precision of it. He hasn't touched me. He is 18 inches away from me in a leather chair, and he has just said the most intimate thing anyone has ever said to me. And he did it quietly, without theater, without the performance of seduction. And I can feel it from the base of my throat to the place where my thighs press together on the seat cushion. I don't answer him. What I do instead, I look at him. I stop managing my expression and I look at him fully, the way I've been carefully not doing for 18 days, and I let him see what that looks like. His breath changes. One breath, just one. A slight deepening, a slight catch, there and gone. But I catch it because I am watching him the way he has been watching me. Like whatever happens next is already happening, has been happening, and we are only now agreeing to say so. I came here tonight because I was angry, I say, which is true, yes. And because I didn't want to be in my room alone with whatever this is, also true. So what do we do with that? He holds my eyes for a long moment. Outside, the city hums its low, constant frequency. The lamp is warm. The floor is cold, where my bare feet rest on the wood, and the chill runs up through my ankles, and I am acutely, specifically, entirely present in my own body, in a way I am not sure I have ever been before. Not in the abstract, not as the woman I was supposed to become, but as exactly this woman, in this chair, in this room. Tonight, he says, we sit with it. And somehow, that is the most devastating thing he could have said. Because when he rises from the chair slowly and moves to the sideboard to pour 2 glasses of water, like this is the most ordinary night, and brings one to me without asking if I want it, and settles back into his chair, as though we are simply going to sit here together in the particular dark of almost morning, with all of this between us, unnamed and alive, and neither of us willing to put it down yet. I realize that the most dangerous version of Dorian Ashford is not the one who commands. It's the one who waits. When I finally go back to my room just before 2, the glass of water still in my hand, I stand outside his study door for 11 seconds. I count them before I make myself walk away. And the terrifying thing, the thing I carry with me down the hall and into the dark, is that I'm not sure if I'm relieved or if I'm furious that he didn't ask me to stay. Chapter 19, Setting New Boundaries. The folder smelled like cedar. Not paper, not ink. Cedar, faint and clean. The kind that belonged to old libraries and careful men. I noticed it before I noticed anything else about the room. Before I registered the floor-to-ceiling windows or the late afternoon light falling across the conference table in long amber bars. Before I registered him, standing at the far end with his back to me, hands clasped behind him, looking out at the city like he owned everything below the glass. Which, given what I'd learned in the past 72 hours, he very nearly did. The folder sat at my place at the table, my name on the tab, Simone Voss, written in his handwriting. I recognized it now, that precise backward slant, compressed and controlled and almost aggressive in their tidiness. I sat down without being invited because I was done waiting to be invited into rooms. I decided that about myself somewhere between Tuesday night and now, though I couldn't have told you the exact moment the decision formed. I opened the folder. Inside, 2 sheets. Clean, no preamble, no elaborate heading, just a numbered list on each page, and at the top of the first a single word in bold. Limits. My chest did something I couldn't name. Not alarm, not quite anticipation. Something that lived in the narrow corridor between the two. You read fast. His voice arrived before I heard him move. That was the thing about Callum Ashford that I was still adjusting to. The way sound and presence decoupled around him. I looked up. He'd crossed half the room without a whisper of shoe leather on hardwood, and now he stood at his end of the table, jacket off, sleeves rolled twice, the late light doing something complicated and unfair to the brown of his forearms. A deep, burnished tone, like the inside of a mahogany cabinet, warm and deliberate and somehow private, as if this version of him, the shirt-sleeve version, was not the one the rest of the world received. You already know I read fast, I said. You clocked me with your own documents. Something moved in his expression. Not a smile, the predecessor of one. I did. He pulled out his chair but didn't sit. He stood behind it, hands resting on the top rail, and looked at me across the length of the table with an attention so specific, it felt like being measured for something I hadn't agreed to wear yet. I'd experienced powerful men before. I'd been in rooms with them, negotiated with them, held my ground against them. None of them had ever made me feel like the room itself was leaning in. I looked back at the pages. "Your list is longer than mine," I said. "Yes." "Is that strategic?" "No." He finally sat. "It's honest." The word landed differently than I expected. I'd braced for a negotiation, for the careful architecture of a man who understood leverage. Honest was a wall I hadn't anticipated. I set the first page flat on the table between us. His list, 23 items, each one written with the same compressed precision as my name on the tab. No euphemism, no code, nothing that required translation. Direct, clinical in places, and in other places so specific that reading them had felt less like reviewing a document and more like watching a door open to a room I hadn't known existed inside another person. "Talk me through this one," I said, pointing without touching. Third item from the top. He read it, already knowing what it said. "Control over environment, meaning I choose the space, the light, the sound, the temperature." He paused. "What happens around you matters to how you feel inside your body. I believe that. I take it seriously." That sounds like it could be terrifying. Or the opposite. Or both. He looked at me. Yes, often both. I folded my hands on the table and felt the cedar smell again, stronger now that he was closer. It was him. Not a product, not an applied thing, just the particular chemistry of his skin and whatever discipline he moved through life with. I stored that information somewhere I didn't have a label for. "What's yours?" he asked. His chin indicated my page, still face down under my palm. I turned it over. He read it without reaching for it. From where he sat, across 6 feet of polished table, he read every word, and I watched his face do nothing and everything simultaneously. A quiet tightening around his eyes, a slight shift in his posture that wasn't retreat and wasn't advance, but was something else. Something that lived in the language of a body that knew restraint, the way a musician knew rests. "You've thought about this," he said finally. "I always think about everything. You know that." "I do." He tapped one finger on the table, once. "But this is different from thinking about a contract clause or a quarterly forecast. This is thinking about yourself, what you are, what you want. Most people avoid that." "I'm not most people." "No," he said, and his voice did something then, a low and deliberate thing, unhurried in a way that made the air between us feel slower. "You are definitively not." I pulled the page back, read it again myself, though I'd rewritten it 4 times before printing the final version. My limits were fewer than his, 6 items, and below them a 7th that I'd almost deleted, that I'd sat with my finger over the backspace key for 3 full minutes before deciding to leave. I need to know why. Every time. Before. He hadn't commented on that one yet. "Item 7, I said. "I saw it." "And?" He leaned forward then. 2 inches, maybe 3, but the geometry of the room adjusted around the motion. "It's not a limit," he said. "It's a requirement." "There's a difference. Does it bother you? That you need to understand what I'm asking before you agree to it?" His expression moved through something I couldn't fully track. "Simone, if it bothered me, we wouldn't be sitting here." I sat with that. Outside the windows, 40 stories below, the city continued its indifferent noise. Up here, the sound insulation was so complete that the silence had texture, like felt. "So tell me why," I said. "Start anywhere." He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of avoidance. The quiet of a man who chose his entry points. "Because the alternative to this," he said, "is what I already had, which was control without agreement, authority without acknowledgement. I was good at it, and it cost me something I didn't know the name of, until it was gone." He stopped. His finger traced a line on the table that wasn't there. following some internal map. What I'm building with these, he nodded at our 2 pages. It has to be. Because the only version of this I want is the one where you know exactly where the edges are and you cross them anyway. Because you choose to. The specific weight of that landed behind my sternum and stayed there. That's a lot of trust to ask for, I said. From someone you known 14 weeks, he said. I know. You're not worried about that? I'm terrified of it. No hesitation, no performance of bravado. But I've been in rooms with you for 14 weeks and I know what it looks like when someone is pretending. And I know what it looks like when someone is entirely, dangerously present. He held my gaze. You are always entirely, dangerously present. That's not something you can fake, and it's not something I've encountered often. My hands were flat on the table. I could feel the cool of the wood against my palms, and I was briefly, acutely aware of every inch of my own skin. The way it fit differently since I'd walked into this building this afternoon. Since I'd sat down with the cedar smell and the 2 clean sheets of paper. There are things on your list, I said carefully, that I haven't. I paused. That I don't have a reference for. Things I've only thought about in the abstract. I know. That doesn't concern you? It makes me want to go slower than I've ever gone. Something in his voice had shifted, barely perceptible, like a key change in the low registers. There is nothing on either of those pages that requires urgency. We don't race toward any of this. We build toward it. Or we don't. Those are both valid outcomes. I looked at him for a long moment. The late light had moved, now cutting lower across the table, and it caught the edge of his jaw. The architecture of it. Not the word I would have reached for, but there it was, the structural dignity of a man who had been shaped by discipline and hadn't let it hollow him out. The dark coils of his close-cut hair. The line of his shoulders under white Oxford cloth. He was beautiful in the way that certain things are beautiful when they've been made with intention. Not decorative, not accidental, purposeful. I was not ready to say that out loud. I pulled both sheets across the table toward me and stacked them together, his on top of mine, and slid them back into the cedar-smelling folder. I need one more thing, I said. He waited. I need you to tell me that if I change my mind about any of it at any point, that we renegotiate. That you don't. I paused. And what I was trying to say was precise and important, and I needed the word to land right. That you don't go distant. The silence stretched. And then Callum Ashford did something I had not anticipated. In 14 weeks, or in the last 40 minutes. He reached across the table, slowly, giving me every opportunity to see it coming, and placed his hand over mine where it rested on the folder. Not gripping, not claiming, just the specific warmth of his palm, the weight of his attention made physical, and he said, I have never once in my life gone distant from something I wanted. I didn't move my hand, he didn't move his. Outside, the city made its noise 40 stories below. And in here, the felt-textured silence held everything I wasn't naming yet, everything I was still learning the shape of, and the cedar smell, and the late light, and the particular unbearable fact that he was looking at me like he would wait as long as it took. He lifted his hand, stood, collected his jacket from the chair with the unhurried efficiency of a man closing a chapter rather than a book. Same time Thursday, he said, not a question. Same time Thursday, I said. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame, his back to me, and I watched the breath expand his shoulders once before he spoke. The cedar, he said, in the folder. I put a block of it inside the cover. He didn't turn around. You noticed it when you walked in. I wanted you to have something that felt like safety before the conversation started. He left. I sat alone in the room with the folder in my hands and the smell of cedar everywhere, and the precise outline of his palm still warm against the back of mine, and the specific impossible problem that I had no framework for what was happening to me, and I was no longer entirely sure I wanted one. Chapter 20. The Testing of Fears. I sent the text before I could think myself out of it. That was the problem with courage. It lived in a split second before your brain caught up. And now the split second was gone. The message was delivered. And I was standing in my kitchen at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, holding my phone like it had just bitten me, watching those 2 gray checks turn blue. I want to try the room. 4 words, no punctuation at the end, because I couldn't decide whether a period made it too formal or whether the absence of one made it look uncertain. I'd split the difference by just not choosing, which was I was beginning to understand about myself a very old habit dressed up as spontaneity. The room. Elias had shown it to me 3 weeks ago. A brief, deliberate tour. Nothing theatrical, no performance in it. He'd opened the door at the end of the hall of his penthouse, the way another man might show you a library or a guest bedroom. Matter of fact, steady. He'd stood in the doorway and let me look without commentary, and what I'd felt standing there wasn't fear exactly. Fear would have been simpler. What I'd felt was the particular vertigo of recognizing something in yourself you'd had no name for, something that had been living quietly in the basement of your body for years, and suddenly there is a door, and the door is open, and the light is on. I had not gone inside. I had said, "Thank you," which was a bizarre thing to say, but it was what came out. He had said, "Whenever you're ready, Naomi," or "never. Both are fine." And I had spent 22 days since then turning those words over in my hands like river stones, examining whether never was an option I actually wanted, or just an exit I was keeping warm in case I needed it. My phone buzzed. "Elias, tonight?" I looked at that single word for a long time. Just that. Tonight. No pressure packed around it, no coaxing, and somehow that restraint was more unnerving than if he'd pushed. A man who didn't push was a man who knew he didn't have to. Me, yes. His building was 15 minutes from mine by car, and I spent all 15 of them in the back seat of the rideshare with my hands folded in my lap, watching the city slide past the windows, the stacked lights, the wet streets, November making everything look like a film still. I was wearing a charcoal wrap dress I'd put on and taken off twice. Not because I was trying to look a particular way, because I'd needed something to do with my hands while my mind ran its laps. I was 31 years old. I had a master's in architecture. I had opinions about Saarinen and Zora Neale Hurston and the criminal underuse of turmeric in American cooking. I was, by any reasonable measure, a woman who knew herself. Except the self I'd known had been assembled in the absence of Elias Beaumont. And now that he was in the picture, certain load-bearing walls were showing cracks. The lobby of his building smelled like cool stone and something botanical. Juniper, maybe, or something drier than that. The concierge nodded at me by name. I'd only been here 4 times, and he already knew my name, which told me something about Elias and the attention he paid to details that most people didn't think to pay. The elevator was mirrored on 3 sides. I didn't look at myself. I looked at the numbers counting upward, and I thought about the text I'd sent, the 2 words I followed it with, and I thought, you can still change your mind at any point. Elias had said that so many times, it had become almost a rhythm between us, a kind of call and response. He said it, I understood it was true. I never quite tested whether I believed it. Tonight might be the night I found out. He opened the door before I knocked. He must have heard the elevator or seen me on the camera. I didn't ask. He was wearing a dark Henley and dark trousers, barefoot, and there was something about a man being barefoot in his own home at midnight that felt more intimate than almost anything else. The deliberate informality of it, like he'd decided to meet me without armor, which made me feel the absence of my own. Naomi, he said my name the way he always said it, full, unhurried, like the name itself deserved the time he gave it. Elias, I stepped inside. The city sprawled behind him through the floor-to-ceiling glass, all that dark water and lit distance. He took my coat and hung it without ceremony, and then turned to look at me, and this was the thing about his attention that I had no adequate language for yet. It wasn't hungry, it wasn't assessing, It wasn't performing interest. It was simply complete. Like when he looked at you, everything else in the room made a courteous exit. You want something to drink first, he said. Not a question. He knew my tells by now. No, I surprised myself. I don't want to give myself time to negotiate. Something moved in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the structural precursor to one. The recognition of a thing he'd been waiting for. Then come sit with me. Not come to the room, not let's get started, or any of the vocabulary I'd been anxious about all week. Just come sit with me. In the living room, on the wide linen sofa with the throw pillow he told me his sister made, under the pendant light that cast everything amber and soft. He sat at an angle to me, close enough that I could smell the slight cedar of whatever he used on his skin, far enough that I had room to be myself, without his proximity rewriting my syntax. Tell me what scared you about it, he said, 3 weeks ago, in the doorway. Nothing scared me. Naomi. The way he said my name that second time, lower, slower, with a specific kind of patience that didn't feel like patience at all, but more like a pressure applied so gently you didn't realize until afterward that it had moved you. That landed somewhere behind my sternum and spread. I wasn't scared of you, I said, which was true and also not the whole truth. I was scared of... I looked at the window, at the city. I was scared of finding out that I wanted it. Because wanting it means I'm the kind of person who wants it. And I've spent a long time having a specific idea of who I am. Silence. Not empty silence. The kind that holds its shape. Who did you think you were? He asked. Self-sufficient. Unbothered. I paused. Uninterpretable. And now? I turned to look at him directly, which cost me something. Not much, but something. Now I think I was lonely in a way I'd convinced myself was independence. He didn't respond to that immediately. He let it exist in the space between us without rushing to fill it. And I understood in that moment why that quality in him, the refusal to fill silence, had unnerved me when we first met, and now felt like one of the most generous things about him. He gave things room to be what they were. The room isn't about what you're afraid of, he said finally. It's not a test you pass or fail. It's a space where what you want is the only rule. He turned slightly more toward me, but you have to know what you want. That's the work. And if I don't know, then we find out together. At whatever pace your body tells us is honest. Your body tells us. Not you tell me. The distinction was small and enormous. We walked down the hall together, and I noticed things. The particular quiet of the apartment at this hour. The way the hardwood was warm under my feet, because I'd taken my heels off somewhere between the sofa and here. And the way Elias walked. Not in front of me, not behind. Exactly beside me. His arm not quite touching mine. And the not quite was its own kind of conversation. He opened the door. I went inside this time. The room was not what people imagined when they imagined rooms like this. No theatrical darkness. No implements displayed like trophies. It was clean and warm. An ivory accent wall, low lighting set to something like amber dusk, a wide platform bed, dressed in deep charcoal. There was a reclaimed wood bench at the foot of it, a side table with a small, precise collection of things I recognized and things I didn't. A window with the curtains drawn. It smelled like vetiver, and something cleaner underneath that, like he'd aired it recently, like he'd thought about me walking into it. Stand here, he said, quietly, not harshly. I stood, and then he didn't touch me. He stood approximately 4 feet away and looked at me with that complete, unhurried attention and said, "Tell me your safe word." "Compass," I said. We'd established that 2 weeks ago, over dinner, clinically and calmly, in a conversation that had felt nothing like what I'd expected, and everything like what I'd needed. "And if you can't speak?" I raised my left hand, 3 fingers extended. "Good." He said it the way you'd say good to something you built. Not praise exactly, more like confirmation of correctness. "Now tell me what you're feeling right now. Exactly. Don't edit. I took a breath. My hands are cold. I stopped. Tried again. There's a feeling that starts at the back of my knees and moves upward when you look at me like that. I don't know what to do with it. I keep wanting to cross my arms, but I know that's me trying to protect something that doesn't need protecting here. I exhaled. I'm afraid of what I'll look like when I can't manage my own face. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed the 4 feet between us and stood in front of me. Close enough now that I had to tilt my chin slightly and lifted one hand and placed it against the side of my face. Just held it there. Palm warm, fingers resting light against my temple, thumb near my jaw, but not on it, not quite. That, he said very low, is exactly what I mean by ready. I felt the truth of it move through me like something tidal, and I wanted to lean into his hand, and I didn't, and the not leaning was its own kind of choice. The last one that felt like restraint rather than desire, and I could feel that distinction eroding. Elias. My voice was steadier than I expected. I know, he said. His hand dropped. He took one step back. Not tonight, he said. And the words hit me like cold water, not because I was relieved, but because I wasn't. And that absence of relief was the most honest thing I had ever felt about myself. Why? I asked, and the rawness in the words surprised us both. He looked at me with something that was neither triumph nor gentleness, but somehow held both. Because, he said, you just told me you're afraid of what you'll look like when you can't manage your face. He tilted his head fractionally, and I want to be the person you trust with that, not the person who takes it before you're sure. I stood in that warm amber room, my hands still cold, the feeling behind my knees still radiating upward, and I understood with the full weight of my 31 years that I had completely, irreparably, and without any remaining negotiating room, fallen in love with a man I still did not fully understand. And he was already walking back toward the door, unhurried, waiting for me to follow. And I didn't move. Elias, he paused in the doorway without turning around. What if I don't want to wait? The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds, I counted. When he turned around, his expression was the one I had no map for yet, the one beneath the patience, beneath the control, the one that lived in the room he'd just asked me to leave. And the sight of it stopped the air in my chest completely. Then, he said, close the door. Chapter 21, The Show of Trust. He was crying. Not the way men cry in movies, not with dignity or restraint, not with a single artful tear tracking down a sculpted cheek. He was sitting at the far end of the room with his back to me, shoulders rounding inward, the way a building looks the moment before it collapses. And there was a sound coming from him that I had no word for. Low, rhythmic, private. The kind of sound that exists only in rooms where a person believes they are completely alone. I had come back for my phone. I stood in the doorway of what he called the preparation room. Not a dungeon, not a playroom, just a room with warm lighting and a long leather chaise and shelves of items I had spent the last 3 weeks learning to name. And I watched Elias Beaumont Cross come apart over a small wooden box resting open in his hands. He didn't hear me, or he chose not to. I should have left, I know that. I should have backed out quietly, taken the stairs, pretended I'd forgotten what I'd seen. That would have been the safe choice, the sensible one, the choice the woman I was 6 weeks ago would have made without a second thought. I didn't move. Inside the box, photographs. I could see from the doorway that they were old, the colors flattened and warm, the way film photographs get when time has handled them. I couldn't see the faces. I could see only his hands around the box. Those hands that had learned the particular geography of my reactions with a precision that still made me unsteady when I thought about it. And they were shaking. Elias Beaumont Cross did not shake. He was 41 years old, and he ran 3 private equity firms and 1 charitable foundation, and he had on more than one occasion reduced a room full of powerful men to silence simply by entering it. He wore his authority the way certain buildings wear their age, not as a burden, but as a fact, structural, load-bearing. He had 3 nights ago held me suspended in a state of such acute sensation that I had lost my own name for several minutes and felt grateful for the loss. He did not shake, but he was shaking now, and something rearranged itself in my chest. Not tenderness, not yet. Something that came before tenderness. Something that lived in the body before the mind had a chance to categorize it. A shift in weight, a rebalancing. Elias. His shoulders locked. He didn't turn. Naomi. My name in his mouth, even like this, even wrecked and quiet. He said it differently than anyone else did. Like the word had texture, like he was choosing it each time. I forgot my phone. I see. Neither of us moved. You don't have to, I started. I know. He closed the box, slow, deliberate. The latch caught with a small, precise sound. I know I don't have to. He set it on the shelf beside him, stood, and when he turned to face me, I expected him to have reassembled himself. Expected the architecture of composure he wore like a second skin to be back in place. It wasn't. His eyes were still wet. His jaw was carrying the specific tension of a person who has just decided to stop performing. He looked older. He looked more real. And something in the hinges of me went loose in a way I was entirely unprepared for. Come here, he said. Not a command. The command voice had a particular frequency I'd become attuned to, low and even and certain. This was something else, an ask dressed in a voice that still couldn't quite beg. I crossed the room. He sat on the edge of the chaise, and I stood in front of him, and for a moment we just breathed in the same air. The room smelled of cedar and something faintly warm, vanilla or amber. I'd never pinned it down. The lighting was the color of late afternoon, even though it was past 10 at night. He had designed this room to feel like a specific time of day that didn't exist anywhere except here. My mother, he said, unprompted. Not looking at me, but at the middle distance somewhere near my collarbone. She died when I was 19. I have 7 photographs. I didn't say I'm sorry. I hated that phrase, the way it made loss into a social transaction. 7 is not enough, I said instead. Something in his face shifted. No, it's not. What was her name? Celestine. He said it with the particular softness of a word that has been worn smooth from years of private use. She was from New Orleans. She made bread every Sunday morning. Not because she had to, because she said the smell was the only alarm clock worth setting. I could smell it, almost, not the cedar and amber of this room, but something older, flour and warmth, and a Sunday that belonged to someone else. I felt suddenly and sharply that I was being trusted with something fragile, not information, but the specific texture of a grief he did not share easily. He looked up at me. I don't usually. He stopped, started again. I don't bring people into rooms where I know. You shouldn't be comforting me. That's not. Don't. I said it quietly, but I said it. Don't tell me what my role is right now. That landed. I watched it land, the small surprise of it crossing his face, the pause where he recalibrated. This was the reversal neither of us had planned. He had walked into every room between us carrying the map. He knew the terrain, the pacing, the exact architecture of when to push and when to wait. I had been in most of the ways that counted, the person being led. Not tonight. I reached out and I put my hand against the side of his face, my thumb just below his cheekbone where the skin was still faintly damp. His whole body went still in a way I recognized. I had gone still like that, under his hands, when something unexpected happened that was also exactly right. He let me. Tell me about her, I said. We stayed like that for 2 hours. He talked. I listened. At some point I sat beside him on the chaise, close enough that our arms were in contact from shoulder to elbow, and at some later point his hand found mine and held it in a way that had no agenda, no direction, just weight and warmth. He told me about Celestine, her garden, her laugh, her absolute refusal to eat food she hadn't cooked herself. He told me about the year after she died, which he described only as the year I decided to control everything I could, And I understood, in the marrow way that truths land when they're told plainly, that I had just been given the key to an entire architecture. I filed it away not as a weapon, but as a responsibility. There is a difference. I was only beginning to learn it. When the talking stopped, not in the way conversations end, but in the way they simply complete, the way a held note finally releases, we were both quiet for a long time. "I owe you a session," he said eventually. Not lightly, not deflecting. An acknowledgement that the plan for tonight had dissolved into something neither of us had prepared for. "You don't owe me anything. The trust exercises, the ones I designed for tonight." His thumb traced the back of my hand, an absent-minded motion, like he wasn't aware he was doing it. "I had a progression planned. Tell me." He looked at me sidelong. "Or I could show you." There it was, the shift. Not sudden, it rolled in the way a weather system moves. You could track it if you were watching, and I had been watching. The grief was not gone from his face, but there was something else alongside it now. And the thing beside it was desire. And the specific thing that made me go very still was that for the first time, I could see it matched. Not him wanting and me receiving, not him leading and me following. Both of us, wanting, at the same time, with the same force. I had wanted him before. I knew the particular way the skin along my spine registered his presence, the specific way the air pressure in a room seemed to change when he turned his full attention toward me. But this was different. This was not the want of a person being taught what her body could feel. This was me, just me, wanting a specific man who had just shown me the inside of a grief he kept in a box. I hadn't known I was capable of wanting like this. He stood, slowly, and extended his hand. "The first exercise," he said, "is simply this. You tell me one thing you want that you've never said out loud, to anyone." My throat tightened. "That's the exercise?" "That's the beginning of the exercise." I stood. I looked at him, really looked, the way you can only look at someone when the room has been stripped of performance. The specific brown of his skin in warm light, the set of his shoulders no longer held in that careful architectural way, but easier now, like a man who has set down something heavy and is feeling the strange relief of empty hands. His eyes, which were not kind exactly but were aware, intensely, specifically, devastatingly aware of me in a way I was still learning to bear. I said, "I want to be the one who decides what happens next." The silence after that was not empty. It was the opposite of empty. It was full, dense, pressing against both of us with equal force. He smiled, not the controlled smile I was used to, the one he aimed like an instrument. This one started at the corner of his mouth and moved without his permission. "Then decide," he said, and the power in that room which had entered with him, which had always lived in him, I felt it move. Cross the space between us like a current passing between conductors, settle in my hands. In the specific steadiness of my own breath, I reached up and I unhooked the top button of his shirt. He didn't move. "I want to see you," I said. "Not the version you prepare for me. The one that was in this room before I arrived." His breath came out slow, controlled, and then not controlled. The smallest fracture in the exhale. Just that. Just enough. "Naomi." "I know," I said, and I moved to the second button. He caught my wrist, not to stop me, to hold on. "For the record," he said, voice low and rougher than I had ever heard it, "this is not how I planned tonight." I looked up at him from close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin. "I know," I said again. "That's why it's working." The box of 7 photographs sat on its shelf and watched us, and somewhere in the warm cedar-scented air of a room designed for trust, something irreversible was quietly, inevitably, beginning. He had walked in here with the map, but I was the one who knew where we were going. "Someone knows." 2 words. He said them the moment I walked through the door, before I'd even set my bag down, before the lock had caught behind me, and the temperature in the room dropped 6 degrees. I stood there, keys still in my hand, reading his face, which was like trying to read weather on a mountain, everything shifting, nothing named. Marcus Caldwell in a gray cashmere sweater, with his sleeves pushed to his elbows, standing at the window of his penthouse, with the city spread behind him like something he owned. His jaw was set. His eyes, when they finally found mine, were the particular shade of dark that meant he had already run every scenario and didn't like a single outcome. My first response was not fear. That bothered me more than the news itself. "Who?" I asked, and my voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. "Doesn't matter yet." "It matters to me." Something moved across his expression. Quick, gone. A flash of something that might have been satisfaction, except that made no sense. Or maybe it made every kind of sense. I was still learning the vocabulary of his face. "Mia." He said my name the way he sometimes did. Not wrong exactly, but with a particular weight on the first syllable, like he was reminding me what it meant. Like he'd decided it meant something I hadn't agreed to yet. "Come here." I didn't move. This was new. 3 months ago I would have moved. 2 months ago I would have moved faster and hated myself for it. Tonight I stood in my own 2 shoes on his imported marble floor. And I did not move. And I felt the specific electricity of that choice run from the soles of my feet, straight up through my spine. His chin lifted a fraction. "There she is," he said, quiet, almost to himself. I didn't know what that meant. I filed it away with the other things I didn't know what to do with yet. A growing pile, a drawer I couldn't quite get closed. "Tell me who," I said. He crossed the room. Not rushed, not slow. That measured, deliberate pace that I had learned to track with something other than my eyes. My skin knew before he was close enough to touch. The fine hairs on the inside of my wrists stood. The backs of my knees, and this was the part I couldn't explain to anyone. This specific geography of my body's response went warm. Not hot. Warm, like being held in a hand you didn't know was around you. He stopped 2 feet away. The distance was a decision. "My CFO's assistant," he said. "She saw the calendar entry, the one that shouldn't exist. I told you to use the alias. I know what you told me. And you didn't. I know what I didn't do." His eyes hadn't left my face. "What I need to know is whether you're going to let this make you run." The question landed somewhere low in my chest, and sat there. 3 months. That was how long I'd been living inside whatever this was. This arrangement. This secret architecture we'd built in the hours between midnight and morning. In hotel rooms booked under names that weren't ours. In the specific charged silence of a man who understood that restraint was not the absence of power, but its most concentrated form. 3 months of learning that my body was apparently a country I had never visited. That I had opinions about things I hadn't known were on the table. That surrender, real surrender, the kind you choose with every cell of your brain fully engaged, was nothing like what I'd been taught it would feel like. I had not run yet. I was not running now. But I felt the pull of the door behind me, not because I wanted to leave, but because the wanting to stay had gotten so big, it scared me. "What's your plan?" I asked. He tilted his head. The cashmere moved with him. I tracked it the way I tracked everything about him lately. Involuntarily, the way your eyes go to movement. Containment, reassignment, the standard approach. He paused. "But that's not the intrusion I'm concerned about." "What else?" "Your sister called my office today." The bottom dropped out of the room. Camille, of course. Who had a radar for secrets I hadn't even fully told myself yet. Who had been asking careful questions for 6 weeks in the patient, relentless way of someone who already knows the answer and is just collecting confirmation. Camille, who had raised me after our mother got sick, who had strong opinions about men with penthouses and stronger opinions about what those men usually wanted from women like us. What did she say? My voice was still even. Somewhere in the last 3 months I had developed this stillness I didn't recognize as mine. She asked if a Marcus Caldwell of Caldwell Capital was someone she should be concerned about in relation to her sister. His expression didn't shift. She was extremely polite. She's always polite. It's her most dangerous quality. Something in his face broke open, just for a second. just enough for me to see the man under the composure. And he laughed. Not the controlled public laugh I'd heard him deploy in boardrooms. The real one. Low and warm and slightly undone. And there it was. Every time. Every single time I thought I had cataloged him, had filed him into something manageable, he did that. Went somewhere unexpected. Showed me a room I hadn't known was in the house. The backs of my knees went from warm to something else. I set my bag down on his console table, took off my coat, hung it on the hook by the door with deliberate precision, because I needed my hands to be doing something with a clear beginning and end. When I turned back, he was watching me with an expression I didn't have a name for. The next time I see her, I know, and I don't know what I'm going to tell her. I crossed my arms. I don't know what this is, Marcus. You know that. I know what it is. Quiet, certain, no performance in it at all. Then you're ahead of me. He moved then, not toward me, which I'd expected, which I'd been bracing for in that way you brace for something you secretly want. He moved to the bar cart near the window and poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a glass, set it on the low table between the sofas. An offering. Space. Sit with me, he said. I sat. The distance between us on the sofa was architectural, deliberate, loaded with everything it was choosing not to do. He turned toward me, one arm stretched along the back cushions, and I was aware of his hand near my shoulder without it touching me, without it almost touching me, just there, existing. Tell me what's actually scaring you, he said. Not the sister, not the assistant. You. The bourbon glass was warm against my palm, the amber color of it in the low light. I looked at it instead of him, which was maybe the same as running, but at a reduced speed. I don't sound like myself lately, I said. It came out before I'd decided to say it. When I'm here, when I'm with you, I say things I didn't plan to say. I want things I can't. I stopped. Keep going. I want things I can't fit into the understanding I had of myself before. Silence, the kind that isn't empty. And that frightens you, he said. It should, shouldn't it? Maybe. He shifted, barely, inches, and the hand on the back of the sofa was somehow closer to the back of my neck, without moving at all. And I understood then that proximity was something he used the way other men use touch. That I had been responding to it for months. That my body had been having conversations with him that my mind was only just beginning to overhear. Or maybe what frightens you is that it doesn't frighten you enough. I looked at him then. Mistake. Not because it was wrong, but because the moment I looked, everything I had been carefully holding at arm's length collapsed the distance on its own. His eyes, that particular dark brown with the gold in it that only showed at certain angles, in certain lights, were completely steady on my face. He was not making a move. He was not doing anything at all, technically. He was simply looking at me the way he sometimes looked at things he had decided. My breath changed. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in stories, with gasps and shaking and neon signs announcing, "This is the moment." Just a slight alteration in rhythm, a pause I couldn't account for, a hitch so small and so total that I felt it somewhere behind my sternum, felt it in the specific pressure of my own lungs. He saw it. Of course he saw it. He saw everything. But he didn't move. That was the part I couldn't get over, the part that had been rewriting my understanding of what power actually was. He had every advantage. The room, the history between us, the fact that I was already 3 steps into something I couldn't name. And he sat there on his side of the sofa, with his hand not quite touching my shoulder, and he let me sit inside what I was feeling, like it was a room I was allowed to look around in first. The wanting arrived not like a wave, but like weather, atmospheric, total, the kind you realize you've been inside for a while before you think to name it. I did not put my hand on his. I did not lean into the space between us. I did not do the thing my body had formed a complete and detailed opinion about. I picked up the bourbon. I took a slow sip. I set it back down. The assistant, I said, Is she a problem or a manageable inconvenience? A beat. Then the corner of his mouth. Manageable, he said. I'll handle it Monday. And Camille? That one's yours. I know. I exhaled. I know it is. The night had gotten fully dark outside his windows. The city below us was all light and motion. All those lives running parallel to ours. All those people who went home at the end of the day to something they could explain to their sisters. I should go home. I knew I should go home. I was still sitting there 40 minutes later when his hand, finally, with no announcement and no ceremony, came to rest against the back of my neck, not gripping, not pulling, not doing anything except being exactly what it was, warm, present, and devastating in its patience. And I felt the ground beneath the version of me I'd walked in with tilt approximately 3 degrees off its axis. I did not move, neither did he. And in the specific suspended silence of all that not moving, I understood for the first time what it meant to be undone by someone who hadn't even started yet. My phone buzzed on the table between us. 1, twice. Marcus looked at it. Looked at me. You going to answer that? He asked. And the answer I gave or didn't give was going to change everything. Chapter 23. The Price of Desire. My grandmother used to say that desire was a tax, not a gift, not a blessing. A tax, something extracted from you whether you agreed to the terms or not. Something that reduced you before it ever made you whole. She said this while pressing my hair on Sunday mornings, the hot comb parting the steam between us, her voice low and certain in the way that women who have survived things speak. Baby, wanting the wrong thing costs more than you've got. I was 9. I didn't understand the economy she was describing. I understand it now. I'm standing in the hallway outside my mother's dining room, and the sound of my family on the other side of that door is a specific kind of pressure. Not loud, not dramatic, just insistent, the way water finds every hairline crack in a wall without announcing itself. I can hear my Aunt Rochelle's laughter, the kind that carries a question inside it. I can hear my mother's voice doing what it always does when she is performing normalcy. A half step too bright, too measured, pitched for the benefit of anyone who might be listening. Which is everyone. Which has always been everyone. My phone is warm in my hand. I haven't looked at it in 11 minutes. I know this because I have been counting. Not the seconds, I am not that far gone, but I have been aware of time in the particular way you are aware of it when something is suspended. When you are waiting for a message you told yourself you don't want, and then told yourself again, more firmly, and then a third time, with language too clean to be honest. He hasn't texted. Of course he hasn't texted. Marcus Ellison does not text. He arrives. He occupies. He says your name with a specific deliberate weight, like he's decided exactly how much of it he wants to use, and is using precisely that much, and no more. And somehow that precision is the most intimate thing anyone has ever done to the syllables of your name. I exhale through my nose and push the door open. The dining room smells like my childhood, seared garlic and good butter, the ghost of Aunt Rochelle's perfume, something dense and floral that she's worn since before I was born. And beneath it all, the particular warmth of central heating in a house that has held 4 generations of deliberate living. The table is set the way my mother sets it when she wants you to feel both welcomed and evaluated. The good dishes, the cloth napkins pressed into precise rectangles. There she is. My mother's voice is a scalpel wrapped in silk. We were starting to wonder. I was returning a work call. The lie comes out clean. Too clean, probably. I have been practicing clean lies lately without fully deciding to. My Aunt Rochelle cuts me a look from across the table. She is 62, gorgeous, and has never once in her life been fooled by a clean lie. She was a federal prosecutor for 23 years. She retired and became more dangerous. Work, she repeats, and the word doesn't do anything on the surface, just sits there, innocent and terrible. I pull out my chair. My cousin Danny, who is 26 and the only one at this table I have ever fully trusted, slides me the breadbasket without being asked and says nothing. This is the specific language of women who love each other across a table of women who are watching. The thing about my family is that none of them are cruel. That would be easier. They are simply attentive in the way that a certain kind of black excellence demands attentiveness. Not because they don't trust me, but because trust in our family is a thing you demonstrate. You demonstrate it through choices that can be spoken aloud. Through men who have been vetted, who come from knowable things, who can be placed within a geography of aspiration that the women at this table understand and have paid for with their own years. Marcus Ellison cannot be placed, not because he lacks anything, God the opposite, but because what he has is not the kind of thing you display at a dining room table with cloth napkins. What he has is the kind of thing that happens in rooms with low light and words that don't repeat themselves anywhere public. Simone, my mother says, and the way she says it, not the Sunday morning way, not the proud of you way, but the I have been patient and I am done being patient way, makes the bread turn to something dense in my mouth. We had lunch with Diane Pemberton on Thursday. I swallow. Okay. She mentioned she saw you at the Whitmore Gallery opening, with a man she didn't recognize. The bread. I focus on the bread. She said he was, my mother pauses, and I know she is choosing her word carefully, the way she chooses everything carefully, and what she lands on. Attentive. Attentive. The word does something physical to me that I am not prepared for. Because I am suddenly not in this dining room anymore. I am 3 weeks ago. I am standing in front of a Kara Walker silhouette installation that spans an entire gallery wall. And Marcus is behind me, not touching me, just near me, and he says, very quietly, right at the edge of where his breath ends and my ear begins, "Tell me what you see." And I told him. I told him more than I meant to tell him, something true and specific about grief and inheritance and beauty made from darkness. And when I finished talking, there was a silence that felt like a held breath, and then his hand, just one hand, came to rest at the small of my back. Not possessive, not performative, like he was steadying something, like he knew. The heat from that one touch had traveled up my spine and down the backs of my knees simultaneously, which is not a thing I knew heat could do, and I had stood there with a Kara Walker silhouette in front of me and my body conducting electricity I hadn't consented to, thinking, this is information about myself I do not know what to do with. I'm not seeing anyone seriously, I say. My aunt sets down her fork. That's not what she asked, sweetheart. Rochelle, my mother's voice is a warning. No, I think we can be direct. Aunt Rochelle folds her hands on the table and looks at me with the specific steady regard of a woman who once cross-examined a sitting senator. You have been different for 3 weeks. Your mother sees it. I see it. Danny, she glances at my cousin, has been very discreet, which tells me she sees it more than any of us. Danny stares at the centerpiece with enormous interest. Different how, I say. Not a question. I know how. I'm asking them to say it. My mother's voice comes softer now, which is worse. Like someone who is finding out something about herself, and not in a way that she's going to bring home. The accuracy of that. The terrible, specific, irreducible accuracy of that. I excuse myself before dessert. The porch is cold, and the cold is a relief. It does something clarifying to the inside of my chest. Squeezes the excess out. I stand with my arms crossed and look at the street. At the amber wash of the streetlight on the pavement, at a neighbor's dog being walked by a man who does not know that 3 feet from where he passes, a woman is dissolving her own certainties one breath at a time. One word. Outside. I don't breathe for a full 4 seconds. Then I breathe too much. I walk to the end of the porch and look down the block, and there is a car parked at the corner that was not there when I arrived. Dark. Expensive in the way that doesn't announce itself. And then the driver's door opens, and Marcus steps out. And even from 40 feet away, even in the amber and shadow of a November street, the specific architecture of him does something to the air that I feel in my sternum before my eyes have fully registered what they're seeing. He is not supposed to know this address. I walk toward him anyway. He is wearing a coat I haven't seen before, charcoal wool, clean lines. And his hands are in his pockets, which means he is waiting. Which means he decided to wait. Which means something I am not ready to turn into language yet. His face, when I reach him, is doing the thing it does sometimes where nothing is performed, where everything is simply present. His brown eyes steady and dark and specific, taking me in the way you look at something you've decided to know completely. How did you mentioned your mother's street once. In passing. His voice is low, the register of it designed, I have come to understand, not to carry further than it needs to. You said the dogwoods were aggressive in spring. I stare at him. You remembered that. I remember everything you say, Simone. Not a boast, a fact. The flatness of it, the simple declarative weight of it, is more devastating than any compliment would have been. The cold is doing nothing useful anymore. My family is inside. My voice comes out steadier than I deserve. I know. He doesn't move. I'm not here to come inside. Then why? Because you've been quiet for 6 days. His eyes don't leave my face. And I needed to know if quiet meant thinking, or if quiet meant done. The honesty of that. The bare, unguarded honesty of a man who I have watched be many things. Deliberate and commanding, and then without warning gentle in a way that undoes me at the cellular level. And right now he is none of those things. He is simply asking. Standing on a sidewalk at 9 o'clock on a cold November night because he needed to know. I feel the ground shift. Not metaphorically. Some actual physical rearrangement in the specific place behind my ribs, where I have been storing everything I have not named. Thinking, I say. Something moves across his face. Not relief, resolution. He takes one hand out of his pocket and reaches up, and what he does is not what I expect. He tucks a piece of my hair, one piece, escaped from where I pinned it before dinner, back behind my ear. The touch is barely a touch. 2 fingers, 2 seconds. The backs of my knees go incandescent. Then take all the time you need, he says quietly. But don't go quiet again. Whatever you're working through, I want to hear it. My mouth is open. I close it. Behind me, the porch light turns on. My mother. Not coming out, just marking. Marcus glances at it, then back at me. And something in his expression is so specifically careful, so precisely tender, that I feel a sudden furious ache in my throat for all the things my grandmother's tax never accounted for. The cost of not wanting. The price of spending your whole life inside the terms everyone else agreed to on your behalf. Go back inside, he says. Text me when they're gone. He gets back in the car. I stand on the sidewalk for a long moment in the cold, my hand pressed flat against my own sternum, feeling the specific drumbeat of a body that has made a decision my mind hasn't caught up to yet. When I finally turn and walk back toward the porch, toward the lit-up window and the cloth napkins and my mother's careful, watchful love, I realize I have not once in this entire evening, asked myself whether or not I should want him, only what it will cost me not to. My grandmother was right. Desire is a tax. What she never told me is that by the time you feel it, you've already paid. Chapter 24, The Taste of Jealousy. I wore the red dress on purpose. That is the choice I cannot take back. Not the wearing of it, but the reason. I told myself it was because Aunt Celestine gave it to me for occasions that mattered, because the silk was the color of ripe pomegranate, and it made my brown skin look like something poured and set in the sun. I told myself those things, all the way up in the elevator, all the way through the marble lobby of the Aldrich Foundation's Winter Gala, right up until the moment I saw him across the room, with her hand on his arm, and my stomach dropped like something cut loose from a height. The choice wasn't the dress. The choice was coming here at all, knowing he would be here, knowing I had no claim on him, no name for what we were, no language for what had been building between us for weeks, like water pressure behind a wall. I came anyway. I put on the red dress and I came. And now I am standing at the edge of a room full of the city's most powerful black professionals, holding a glass of sparkling water that has gone warm in my grip, watching Damien Ashford laugh at something a woman in a gold gown is saying, and I am learning something new and terrible about myself. I am not a jealous person. I have never been. I have been careful, measured, unbothered by design. A woman who built her entire interior life on the principle of reasonable distance. And yet, there is something happening at the backs of my knees right now, a slow heat crawling upward that has nothing to do with the room's temperature and everything to do with the way she is touching his arm. The way her fingers rest there, easy and familiar, like she has rested them there before. The sensory metaphor that will haunt me for the rest of this night, I realize, is salt. The way it draws out moisture. The way it stings a place you didn't know was open. The way your mouth floods with it before you can decide whether you want what it's seasoning. Everything in this room suddenly tastes like salt. Her name, I will learn later, is Simone Laurent. She is a cardiologist. Of course she is. She is the kind of woman who looks assembled rather than dressed. Bone structure like an architectural drawing, locks pinned into a crown so precise it seems impossible, skin the deep, clear brown of pecan shells in web light. She is extraordinary, and I hate that I can see it. And I hate more that seeing it is making something small and unfamiliar curl up behind my sternum like smoke finding a crack. Damien has not seen me yet. This is the window. I could leave. I could set down this warm glass and walk back through the lobby and into the cold and pretend I was never here. Pretend the dress was just a dress. Pretend the last 6 weeks of stolen conversations and charged silences and one moment in a hallway where his hand on my lower back nearly undid my entire sense of self were just professional proximity, coincidence, nothing. I stay. I stay because the woman I am becoming, the one I keep catching glimpses of in mirrors and in his eyes, does not run from the thing that frightens her. She walks toward it with her chin level and her breathing managed and her silk dress catching the light. I cross the room. I count the feet because it gives me something to do with my mind while my body does whatever it is doing. That recalibration, that settling into a different gravity that happens whenever he looks at me. His gaze finds me and holds, and for exactly 2 seconds, something crosses his face that is not the polished composure I have come to expect from him. Something quick and unguarded. His mouth does not smile yet. His eyes do first. Naomi. He says my name the way you open something you've been waiting to open. Damien. I keep my voice even. It costs me. The woman, Simone, turns and her smile is genuine, which almost makes it worse. Is this your colleague? She asks him, and the word colleague lands in my chest like a small, precise blade. Not because she means it cruelly, because she doesn't know any better, because he hasn't told her anything different. Something like that, he says, and he is watching my face when he says it, testing me, reading me the way he always does, that unhurried, surgical attention that makes me feel simultaneously understood and dissected. I extend my hand to Simone. Naomi Cole, it's a pleasure. Simone Laurent, her grip is firm, direct. A woman who operates on hearts for a living would have a grip like that. Damien and I went to undergrad together, Howard, class of 2006. She says it with the specific warmth of someone naming a place they still carry. He tells me you're in acquisitions? I am. She's the best in the city, Damien says. Quiet, certain, not a compliment the way other men offer compliments, not performance, not deflection, a statement of record. The salt again, flooding, because that is the thing about him that I cannot defend against, the gentleness. I have learned to manage the boldness, the way he takes up space and redirects rooms, and looks at me like he is solving a problem he intends to solve at his own pace. I have built walls against a boldness. The gentleness finds every crack. Simone says something gracious and makes her exit, touching his arm once more as she goes. There it is again, that touch, and this time I am close enough to watch his face while it happens. He doesn't lean into it. He doesn't follow it with his eyes. He is already looking at me. He takes my glass from my hand without asking, sets it on a passing tray. Then he tips his head toward the terrace and says simply, "Walk with me." It is not a question. It is never a question with him, and I am still negotiating with myself about whether I find that insufferable or intoxicating. But my feet are already moving, so perhaps that negotiation has been settled without my consent. The terrace is cold. January in this city has an opinion, and it presses its opinion through the silk of my dress immediately, raising goosebumps along my arms in a fast, running line from wrist to shoulder. The party hum drops to a murmur behind the glass doors. The city spreads below us, all lit grid and dark water, and I stand at the railing and breathe through my mouth, because breathing through my nose means smelling his cologne, and I cannot afford that right now. "You're angry," he says. I'm not angry. Then what are you? The question is salt in a wound I wasn't ready to admit I had. I turned to look at him. In the terrace light, his face is all shadow and clarity. The strong line of his forehead, the dark of his eyes, the way his collar is open one button, which I have decided is a deliberate act of psychological warfare on his part, and I will not be moved by it. I am moved by it. I don't know what I am, I say, and the honesty of it surprises even me. It comes out less steady than I planned, less managed, more true. He is quiet for a moment. Then he moves. Not fast, never fast, always this deliberate, unhurried shift of weight, until he is standing at the railing beside me, close enough that our arms almost touch. Almost. The distance between almost and actually has been the whole geography of whatever this is. She's an old friend, he says, nothing more than that. You don't owe me that explanation. I know I don't. A pause. I'm giving it anyway. The city below us breathes its cold breath upward. My skin is electric with it. The cold and the proximity and the 6 weeks of accumulation that I have been managing so carefully, so responsibly, stacked now against the sight of another woman's hand on his arm, and the way he said my name when he saw me, and this dress that I wore on purpose. What are we doing, Damien? I ask it before I can stop myself. It is the most dangerous sentence I have said to him. More dangerous than anything in any of the charged hallway moments, or the late meetings, or the night he made me coffee at midnight because neither of us was willing to be the first to leave. More dangerous because it makes the undefined thing require a definition. He turns to face me fully. The movement is slow enough that I have time to prepare, and I still am not prepared. He reaches out and touches my face, just the backs of 2 fingers against my cheekbone, the lightest possible contact, and I feel it everywhere. Not a spreading warmth, a specific targeted disruption, the catch of it behind my eyes, the sudden stillness in my lungs, the way my body reorganizes itself around the point of contact, like everything else is less real. You know what we're doing, he says. His voice is low. Not seductive low in the way I have braced for. Honest low, careful with it. You've known for a while. Knowing isn't the same as saying it out loud. The corner of his mouth moves. No, it isn't. His fingers stay where they are. 2 fingers, my cheekbone. The whole weight of the last 6 weeks balanced on that point of contact, and my body is making decisions that my mind is still drafting memos about. The heat has moved from the backs of my knees to somewhere deeper, something central and new, and slightly alarming in how specific it is. Not abstract longing, not the idea of wanting, but the particular wanting of this, of him, of whatever version of Damien Ashford is going to walk through that door this time. I watched you across the room, I admit. The words taste like salt, and I felt something I don't have a name for. Tell me what it felt like. The city is cold. His eyes are not. Like ground shifting, I say. Like finding out a floor you trusted isn't solid. And right now, he is very still, waiting. Right now, the floor is not solid. Right now, his hand has moved from my cheekbone to the edge of my jaw, the faintest curl of his fingers. And I am learning that my body is capable of responses I have never field tested, never even theorized. The woman I was before this dress, before this terrace, before 6 weeks of almost, she would have stepped back. She would have named this a professional complication and managed it at a distance. I do not step back. Right now, I say, it feels like the beginning of something I won't be able to take back. He looks at me for a long moment. His thumb traces the edge of my jaw, once, slow, like he is reading something in Braille, and then he drops his hand and steps back, and the absence of contact is its own kind of sensation, the salt sting of a thing removed before you are done with it. Then you should decide, he says quietly, whether that frightens you. He opens the terrace door and holds it for me. The gentleman, sudden and precise after everything else he has just been. And as I pass him, as the warm air of the gala wraps around me, he leans down just enough that his voice finds the curve of my ear. Because it doesn't frighten me at all. Chapter 25, The Blindfolded Encounter. He was reading poetry when I found him. Not scrolling through it on a phone, not performing it for my benefit. Reading it, a slim volume with a cracked spine and margin notes in handwriting so dense and layered, it looked like two people arguing across decades of ink. His reading glasses sat low on his nose, a detail I had never seen before, a detail that did something structural to the image I'd built of him. He didn't hear me come in. His lips moved slightly over the words, silent, like he was tasting syllables before deciding whether to swallow them. I stood in the doorway of the study for longer than was reasonable. Langston Cole in a boardroom was a force of nature I had taught myself to survive. Langston Cole in front of a judge, in a negotiation, at the head of a table where men twice his age deferred without fully understanding why. That version of him I had built defenses against. I had cataloged his tactics, memorized the temperature shifts in his voice, learned which silences meant patience and which ones meant he was about to dismantle something you believed was stable. But Langston Cole reading poetry in his own library on a Sunday evening, glasses on, shoes off, one ankle crossed over the other, on an ottoman that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. That version I had no architecture for. He reached the end of whatever page it was, and his hand moved to turn it without looking up. Are you going to stand there all night? Or are you going to come in and tell me what you decided? The glasses, I noticed, did not move. I haven't decided anything, I said. That is itself a decision. He finally looked up, and the glasses caught the light. Just for a second, just enough. Sit down, Naomi. I sat. Not because he told me to. I sat because my legs had been making poor decisions since I walked in, and found him soft-edged and human, and nothing like the man I needed him to be if I was going to leave this room with my resolution intact. The book's cover read, Sterling A. Brown, The Collected Poems. I recognized the name in the way I recognized things I'd learned once and had not thought about since. He saw me looking. My grandmother's copy, he said. She read it to me before I could read myself. The margins are both of ours. He closed it without marking the page. You were asking about the blindfold. I wasn't asking about it. I was asking what you meant when you said. I know what you were asking. He set the glasses on the end table with a precision that seemed deliberate, a ritual. Without them, the softness receded. Not entirely, just enough. The question is whether you want the answer in words or in practice. The room was warm. It had nothing to do with the temperature. Langston, Naomi. That is not an answer. No, he agreed, and the corner of his mouth moved in a way I was starting to identify as dangerous. But it's your name, and I like how you look when I say it like that. Like you've just stepped off a curb you didn't see coming. I hated that he was right. I hated more that I couldn't hide it. Fine, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I deserved. Practice. He produced the blindfold from the desk drawer like it had been waiting, which it probably had. black silk, or something that moved like silk. I never touched it long enough to be certain. He held it between two fingers and just looked at me. And there was nothing theatrical about it, no performance, which was somehow worse. Theater I could have survived. "Before we begin," he said, "tell me the word." "Meridian. And you'll use it. If I need it." "Naomi." The weight in his voice was specific. "You'll use it." "I'll use it," I said, "if I need it." He accepted that. He crossed the room and I tracked every step on the hardwood, measuring sound because looking directly at him had become something I could only do in controlled doses. "You know what's funny?" he said, when he was close enough that I could feel the warmth of him before we touched. That specific warmth bodies carry, that animal fact of heat. Most people think blindfolding is about what you can't see. He moved behind me. I stayed very still. It's actually about what you can feel, once seeing stops being an option. Your brain redistributes. Suddenly everything that was background. His fingers found the back of my neck and moved my braids over my shoulder with a gentleness I was completely unprepared for. Becomes foreground. "Is that your clinical observation or your sales pitch?" I said. "That," he said close to my ear, "is what I call setting the scene. And for the record, I don't need a sales pitch. You're already here." I hated that too, with a thoroughness that felt like affection. The silk settled over my eyes and the knot he tied was firm but careful. And the world became texture and temperature and the specific shift in air pressure when he moved. He came around to face me. I could tell by the direction the warmth moved. And then he didn't touch me at all. And the absence was its own kind of contact. "What do you hear?" he asked. I could have made a joke. I was good at jokes. I'd used them like a fire suppression system for most of my adult life. Instead, I listened. Actually listened. And what I heard was the house settling against the February cold, the faint rhythm of distant traffic 6 floors below, the particular quality of silence that belongs to rooms full of books, and his breathing, measured, controlled, but not entirely steady. Not entirely steady. That discovery landed somewhere south of my sternum. "I hear you trying to sound unbothered," I said. A pause. "You're going to be trouble," he said, and there was something in his voice that I had not heard before. Not admiration exactly, but its more dangerous cousin, the thing that precedes a person deciding you are worth the risk of wanting. "I want you to stand up." I stood. His hands found my waist. Not a grab, not a grip. A placement, deliberate and warm through the fabric of my dress. His thumbs finding the 2 hollows at the small of my back, as though he had mapped me in advance. The touch moved upward, slow, a question that already knew its answer, following the line of my spine through layers of fabric and ending at my shoulders where he turned me, slowly, 1 degree at a time, until I lost track of which wall I was facing. Disoriented in his hands, that phrase arrived fully formed in my head, and I filed it under "Do not examine right now." "Where are you?" he asked. "I don't know." "Good." He stopped turning me. "Now tell me what you feel." I felt his hands on my shoulders, his thumb tracing a slow arc across the curve where my neck met my collarbone. The warmth of the room concentrated now in a specific radius around us. The structural change in my own breathing that I was trying very hard to characterize as anything other than what it was. "Warm," I said, because it was true and it was safe. "What else?" "Your hands." More specific. "Your hands," I said, "are very—" I stopped. The word "careful" arrived, and I almost used it, and then understood it was exactly right, and exactly too much. "They're specific," I said instead. "Like you're not exploring, like you already know." He made a sound low in his chest that was not a word, and did not need to be. His thumb traced my collarbone again, and this time I felt it. The heat that lives behind the knees of all places that spread upward through my thighs, like I was some kind of architectural structure, and he had found the load-bearing point. I had read about this in theory. I had believed in it the way I believed in documented phenomena I had never personally witnessed, in principle, from a respectful academic distance. This was not academic distance. This was the ground shifting. Langston, I said, and my voice was doing something I did not authorize it to do, dropping, roughening at the edges, losing its professional register entirely. Still here, he said, quiet. I know you are. I paused. That's the problem. His hands stilled on my shoulders. The stillness itself was a kind of pressure. Take the blindfold off, he said. Something in me resisted. The dark behind the silk had become, in the span of 10 minutes, a place where things were true that I had not yet decided how to handle in daylight. I reached up and untied the knot, slowly, and the room came back in layers, lamplight amber and warm, bookshelves rising to the ceiling, and Langston directly in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my chin to meet his eyes. No glasses now, no softness buffering the full impact of his attention. His expression was, I don't have a word for it yet. I've been looking for the right one since that moment, and I haven't found it. It was not victory. It was not tenderness alone. It was the face of a man who has waited a long time for something and has just received confirmation that his patience was not delusional. He was undone, barely, just at the edges, but I caught it. You said this was about trust, I said. It is. Then trust goes both directions. My voice was steadier now. I needed it to be. What are you afraid I'll see, Langston, when you're not controlling what I'm paying attention to? The question landed. I watched it land. He looked at me for a long moment, with something moving behind his eyes that he hadn't invited in, and then he said, very quietly, without any of his armor, That's the first question you've asked that I'm not ready to answer. I took a step back. One step. Enough to breathe. Then we're even, I said. He picked the book of poems up from the table, opened it to the exact page he'd been on, put his glasses back on. Good night, Naomi, he said. I walked to the door, and my legs held. Langston. I stopped with my hand on the frame. The margin notes, which ones are yours, and which are your grandmother's? A beat. Hers are in blue, mine are in black. He turned a page. I stopped leaving room between them years ago. After a while, I stopped being able to tell where her arguments ended and mine began. I walked out. I made it to the hallway and stood against the wall in the dark, with my dress still warm from his hands, and I understood. With the specific, quiet terror of a person who has just seen the bottom of a well and still cannot stop leaning over the edge. That I was not falling for a man. I was falling into an inheritance of something. And the terrifying part was that I could already feel what it was trying to teach me. Chapter 26, Rules of Engagement. The candle smelled like cedar and something darker, vetiver, maybe, or the ghost of it, and I had been staring at its flame for the better part of 4 minutes trying to remember how to breathe like a person who had never been touched. That was the problem. I had been touched. Not tonight, not yet, but the memory of his hands lived somewhere between my shoulder blades, and no amount of sitting upright in this ridiculous high-backed chair was going to evict it. Marcus's study held the particular silence of rooms that have witnessed serious things. The bookshelves ran floor to ceiling on 2 walls, real books, red books, their spines cracked and color-faded in ways that money alone cannot manufacture. A glass of water sat on the low table between us, and I had not touched it because reaching for it felt like conceding something, though I could not have told you what. He was across the room. He had been across the room for 11 minutes. I knew because I had counted. You're gripping the armrest, he said, without looking up from the legal pad in his lap. I'm resting my hand on the armrest. Your knuckles are white, Imara. I loosened my fingers, deliberately, one at a time. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, lower than that, more private, the kind of sound a man makes when he's pleased with something he has the discipline not to show. He set the pen down and finally looked at me, and that was worse than the not looking, because Marcus Cole looking at you was a full-body event. His eyes were very dark and very still, the particular stillness of someone who has trained himself out of restlessness, and when they settled on my face, I felt them like a change in air pressure. We need to talk about the framework, he said. We're We're circling. He leaned forward and rested his forearms on his knees, a gesture so unguarded, so casually human, that it startled me more than any of his controlled precision ever had. I don't want to circle with you anymore. The candle flame leaned east in a draft I couldn't feel. Then stop moving in triangles and say the thing, I said. Something shifted in his face. Not softness exactly. Marcus didn't do softness the way other men did. It was more like a door opened briefly, and I saw the room behind it. And the room was not at all what the facade suggested. Last week scared me, he said. I waited. Not because of what happened, because of what almost didn't happen, because I almost didn't stop. He picked up the pen again and set it back down, and I understood that small fidgeting motion cost him something real. I need to know we have language for the edges, not because I don't trust myself, because I trust you, and you deserve architecture, not just instinct. The ground moved, not metaphorically. Something beneath my sternum shifted its weight to a different foot, and my body registered it before my mind caught up. A low, spreading warmth that started at the backs of my knees and moved north with the patience of something that has nowhere else to be. This was the thing I couldn't explain away. Not when he was commanding, not when he was precise and beautiful and terrifying in his control. This moment of him sitting 11 feet away, admitting that I scared him too. This was the thing that undone the careful architecture of my own restraint. I was not ready for that. I was not built for that version of him. Okay, I said. My voice came out lower than I intended. He had prepared, of course, because he was Marcus. The legal pad held 3 columns, and I was grateful for the structure because it gave my eyes somewhere to go that wasn't his hands. Safe words first, he said. I use a traffic system as a baseline, but I want something more specific, something that belongs to us. Harbison, I said. It left my mouth before I'd consciously chosen it. He looked up. Your grandmother's name. She raised me. She was the person who taught me what I was allowed to want. I paused. It feels right to put her name on the thing I used to protect myself. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed registers, still controlled, but warmer, like a coal banked rather than extinguished. Harbison is your red, your stop, absolute and irrevocable. I hear it, everything ends. No processing, no continuation. Done. And yellow? Choose something that means slow down but don't stop. I thought about it. Threshold. Why? Because that's what it is. The edge of a room I'm not sure I should walk into. He wrote it down. The scratch of the pen on paper was very loud in the quiet, and I focused on it the way you focus on a fixed point when the world is tilting. Now the other side, he said. I need to know what you want to push toward, not just what you want to stop. That's a different kind of vulnerability. Yes. You're asking me to inventory my desires out loud. I'm asking you to trust me with them. The warmth behind my knees moved again. I pressed my feet flat against the floor. Control, I said. I need to understand the difference between surrendering control and having it taken. They feel different. I don't want the second one. He held my gaze. They are different, and I need you to know. The first one, what you give me, that's the thing I value most. If you stop giving it freely, there's nothing. There's no dynamic without your agency at the center of it. He paused. This doesn't work unless you're choosing every single time. Every single time, I repeated, even mid-scene, especially mid-scene. He turned a legal pad toward me. Read the 3rd column. I leaned forward. His handwriting was precise and unexpectedly beautiful. The handwriting of a man who had been made to practice penmanship and had quietly kept at it. The 3rd column was headed Her Authority, and beneath it, in clean lines, she initiates scene closure, always. She sets pace escalation. He follows. Aftercare is not optional. It is the scene's final act. She names what she needs. He listens before he acts. I read it twice. You wrote this before I got here, I said. I wrote it 3 days ago. You've been thinking about protecting me for 3 days. I've been thinking about you for considerably longer than 3 days, Imara. The candlelight moved again, and this time I felt the draft, cold against my collarbone, where the top 2 buttons of my blouse were open. I was suddenly very aware of that small exposure, of the specific 2 inches of skin between my throat and the cotton. His eyes moved there and came back. He did not pretend he hadn't looked. "Come here," he said, quietly, nothing commanding in it. It was almost a question. Almost. I stood before I decided to. That was the terrifying part. My body moved without consulting me, and I noted it the way you note a symptom, with the clinical distance of someone who knows the diagnosis is going to change everything. I crossed the room and stopped 3 feet from him. He remained seated, deliberate. I understood, because standing would have given him the physical authority, and he was refusing it right now. He was looking up at me. He was choosing to be the one who looked up. "Give me your hand," he said. I extended it. My left hand, palm up, because something in me was already moving toward offering rather than withholding, and I was not ready to look at what that meant. He took it, not the grip I expected, not anything performative. He held my hand the way you hold something you're trying to understand through touch alone, his thumb moving once across my palm. Slowly, with a kind of attention that made my skin report back to my entire nervous system simultaneously. "Harbison stops everything," he said. "Threshold slows it, and this," his thumb moved again, "the same slow path. This is what I want. This is what I'm asking you to trust me with. Not the scenes, not the structure. This." The warmth behind my knees dissolved upward. I felt it everywhere at once. Not heat exactly, but pressure. The specific full-body awareness of being seen, in a way I had no vocabulary for yet. My throat closed around something that was not quite speech. "I don't have a word for this yet," I admitted. "You don't need one tonight." I need to know what this makes me." His thumb stilled. "It makes you someone who knows what she wants and is brave enough to be in the same room as it." I thought about my grandmother's name on the legal pad. I thought about the word threshold, and how I had chosen it because it was honest, because it named exactly where I was standing, in the frame of a door, neither inside nor out, my hand extended into a room I had never entered, learning the temperature of it with my fingertips before committing the rest of me. "One more rule," I said. "Name it." "You tell me when you're scared too." I looked down at him. "Not just the one time, not just tonight. Every time it's true. Because if this is going to be equal, if my agency is really at the center, then I need to know that you're not just managing me. I need to know you're in it too." Something moved through his face that I had no word for either. He turned my hand over, very slowly, and pressed his mouth to the inside of my wrist. Not a kiss exactly, more the held breath before one, and I felt my pulse spike beneath his lips, and I knew he felt it too, and neither of us said anything about it. "Agreed," he said against my skin. The candle flame went still. Every rule we had just laid down felt less like a fence and more like a foundation, and I had spent enough years standing in doorframes to know the terrifying, exhilarating difference between the two. "So we start," I said. He looked up at me, his mouth still close to my wrist, his eyes darker than cedar and twice as patient. "We already did," he said, and the floor did not shift this time. This time, I was the one who moved it. Chapter 27. Wicked Weekend Retreat. The bag hits the floor before I've even decided to drop it. "You moved the furniture." It isn't a question. I'm standing in the center of the main room of the retreat. Some architect's fever dream of glass and raw timber suspended over a Georgia hillside, and everything is wrong. The 2 separate sitting areas I'd mapped in my head during the 3-hour drive have been collapsed into one. The chairs face each other like an interrogation. A low table between them holds a single candle, already lit, though we arrived together, though I watched him unlock the front door, though there was no one else here. "I had the caretaker rearrange things yesterday," Dominic says behind me. Unhurried. like he anticipated this exact moment of my disorientation. You plan space the way you plan conversations. You find the exits before you sit down. I turn around. That is the thing about him I can never prepare for. The way he looks at me, like he's been thinking about me specifically. Not women in general, not the idea of me, but the particular and inconvenient fact of me. Dominic Ashford, in a white linen shirt with the cuffs already rolled, is not a man who has arrived anywhere. He is a man who has been waiting. That's a surveillance habit, I say, not a character flaw. I didn't say flaw. He sets his keys on the kitchen island without looking away from me. I said I moved the furniture. I don't know what to do with a man who removes my strategies before I've deployed them. I've spent 11 years learning how to be the most prepared person in any room. My mother called it anxious, my mentor called it discipline, I called it survival. And Dominic has a gift, a specific and maddening gift, for making rooms that don't accommodate my preparations. I walk to the window. The hill drops away into a gray-green blur of hickory and pine, and the sky is doing something complicated with the light, all amber bruising toward purple at the seam of the ridge. Beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when you're too unsettled to fully receive them. The second bedroom, I say. Is it still? Yes. You don't know what I was going to ask. You were going to ask if the second bedroom still has a lock. He moves into the kitchen, opens the refrigerator, pulls out a bottle of something dark. It does. I wouldn't remove a lock, Solène. Solène. The way he says my name. Not Solène, the way everyone else flattens it, but the full, soft weight of it. Solène, like he learned it from someone who loved it. Does something specific to the back of my knees. Not weakness, more like a vibration. Like a string that's been plucked and is still moving. I hate that I noticed. I've been noticing things I have no framework for since the first night I met him at the Hargrove Foundation Gala, when he handed me a glass of wine and said, "You're holding that like a prop, not a drink." And I had to excuse myself to the restroom to recalibrate, because he was right, and I didn't understand how he was right. That was 6 weeks ago. I have been in a low-grade state of recalibration ever since. This weekend was supposed to be intentional. That was the word I used to myself on the drive up. Intentional. We had talked, actually talked, in full sentences over several evenings, and one very long phone call, about what this place might mean, about the parameters of exploration, about what I was curious about, if curious was even the honest word, and what I was unwilling to do, and what I was afraid I might want before I'd finished being afraid of wanting it. He'd listened to all of it without rushing me, and without crucially letting me talk myself out of being here. But standing in this room with the furniture rearranged and a candle that has no business being lit yet, I understand that Dominic Ashford does not do intentional the way I do. He does something else, something that feels like intention from the inside, and feels like surrender from the outside. And I cannot yet determine which direction I'm facing. He pours 2 glasses of something I can smell from across the room. Dark cherry, wood smoke, something medicinal and warm, and sets one on the table between the chairs. You're not I know what I'm not. He sits in one of the chairs, crosses one leg over the other, lifts his glass. His voice drops a register, not to intimidate, but the way voices drop when something real is about to be said. I'm asking, sit with me. I sit. The chair is angled toward his at maybe 30 degrees, close enough that my knee is 8 inches from his. I know it's 8 inches because I measure things. I count. I manage distance the way some people manage money, carefully, never spending more than I can recover. Tell me what scared you on the drive up, he says. I wasn't scared. Solène. There it is again. That specific plucking. I pick up the glass to have something to do with my hands and take a sip, and the drink hits the back of my throat with a heat that spreads slowly, unpredictably, the way a blush does when you can't stop it. I was cataloging, I say finally. What were you cataloging? Reasons this was reasonable. Evidence that I hadn't lost my mind agreeing to come here. I look at the candle instead of him. I made a list, actual bullet points, in my phone, in the notes app on the drive. A pause. Then, how many? 14. Something happens in the silence after that. I think it might be him not laughing. The effort of it. That's not funny, I say. No, he agrees, and his voice is so careful, so deliberately neutral, that I look up and he is not laughing. He is looking at me with something that I do not have a name for yet. Something that is adjacent to tenderness, but has an edge to it, like tenderness that has been sharpened by wanting something for a long time. You made a list, he says slowly, of 14 reasons being here with me is reasonable. He sets his glass down, leans forward, elbows on his knees, reduces the 8 inches to 5. And when you got to the end of the list? I don't answer immediately, because the honest answer is that when I got to the end of the list, I added a 15th point, which said because when he puts his hand at the small of my back, I stop thinking. And then I deleted it, and then I drove the rest of the way with the particular discomfort of someone who has just discovered something true about themselves in a public-facing document. The list worked, I say. Did it? I'm here, aren't I? He studies me. I have been studied by brilliant people, professors, partners, opponents in courtrooms, and none of them have studied me the way Dominic does, which is to say, not looking for weakness, not looking for leverage, looking for the specific shape of who I am, the way a sculptor looks at stone. Stand up, he says. This time it lands differently. Not because the words changed, because I changed in the 30 seconds between the first time he said it and now, because something in the room has shifted, like atmospheric pressure before rain, and I feel it in my sternum, in the place just below my collarbones that I didn't know was a place until this man started occupying space near me. I stand up. He stands too, and that's when I understand the reversal, because I thought he was the one with the power here, thought it from the moment I walked into the rearranged room, thought it from the lit candle and the poured drink and the specific geometry of the chairs. And now he is standing in front of me, and something in his face is open in a way I have never seen it open, uncertain in a way that costs him something to show me. And I realize the control I thought he had was architecture, was preparation, was his version of 14 bullet points. He is as undone by this as I am. That knowledge moves through me like the drink did, starting somewhere central and spreading outward, but faster, and to places the drink didn't reach. I've been thinking about your hair, he says, and it is the most unexpected sentence he could have said, and therefore I believe it completely. Since the gala, the way you had it up, and then, at the end of the night, it was coming down on one side, and you didn't fix it. I don't think you knew. I didn't know. I thought about it for a week, he says. One loose piece of your hair. He reaches up slowly, giving me every opportunity to step back, and touches the side of my face, not my face, the edge of it, the place where my jaw meets my neck, where my hair begins, with 2 fingers, trails them back, gently, until he finds a pin. He removes it. I feel one section of my twist loosen and fall against my neck, heavy and warm, and the sensation of it, of my own hair releasing, of his fingers quiet and certain at my temple, closes my eyes before I've decided to close them. That's when I know I'm in trouble. Not the kind of trouble I was cataloging in the notes app. Real trouble. The kind where your body makes a decision and sends your mind the memo afterward. Because I am standing in the middle of a room in the Georgia hills with my eyes closed, and the man I have been careful about for 6 weeks is holding a single hairpin, and I am wanting something. Not in the abstract. Not in the theoretical way I've been treating this whole arrangement, turning it into research, into careful, controlled curiosity. In the real way. In the way that starts at the back of your knees and moves up. In the way that has nothing to do with bullet points. In the way that has no name yet. Because I have never felt it before. And I am the kind of woman who names everything. And I am completely without language. And I do not move away from his hand. Solange, he says softly. This time, it doesn't vibrate the string. This time, it severs it. I open my eyes and he is closer than 5 inches, and I understand with sudden cellular certainty that I drove 3 hours up a Georgia mountain, not because of 14 reasons, but because of one reason that I have been very intelligently avoiding, and the reason is this. I want to find out what I'm capable of wanting. He sees the moment I understand it, and he takes one careful step back. Dinner first, he says, and the authority is back in his voice, but softer now, wrapped around something that might be protectiveness, or might be restraint, or might be both. And he turns toward the kitchen, and I am standing in the middle of the room with my hair half down and my chest unsteady, and the absolute humiliating revelation that the person who just lost all their power is me. And I don't want it back. That's the part I can't explain away. I don't want it back. He's already pulling things from the refrigerator, moving with the easy confidence of a man who knows what comes next, and I'm standing here with a new and ungovernable fact lodged in my chest. I am not afraid of what might happen tonight. I am afraid of who I might be when it's over. And underneath that fear, quiet and shockingly clear, I hope she's someone I don't recognize. Chapter 28. The Role of the Dominant. I need you to tell me what frightens you most about tonight. Not because I'll avoid it, but because I need to know exactly where the edge is before I walk you to it. The words landed somewhere behind my sternum and stayed there, vibrating at a frequency I had no name for. I had prepared for this evening the way I prepared for everything consequential in my life, obsessively, methodically, and in complete denial of what the preparation actually meant. I had researched. I had made lists. I had told myself that what Marcus Aldridge and I were entering was a negotiated arrangement between two consenting adults who understood power and psychology and the clinical architecture of desire.